Everyone's had one of those days when life feels like complete chaos and you think, I wish I could just disappear and take on someone else's identity. Usually, that's just a fleeting urge to escape your bills. But what if you were waiting for a train and saw a woman who looked exactly like you? And worse, what if you decided to steal her bag and take over her life? That's exactly the kind of madness Orphan Black is built on. At first glance, it seems like just another crime thriller about identity theft, but it goes way deeper than that. Suddenly, the story spirals into a wild conspiracy involving killer clones, suburban housewives hiding bodies in the garage, and bizarre bioethical scandals. All of it carried on the shoulders of Tatiana Maslany, delivering such incredible performances that you genuinely forget it's the same actress on screen. But at its core, the show isn't just cold science fiction about corporations and genetic patents. It's packed with tension and grounded by a powerful emotional core centered on family loyalty. So today on the channel, Orphan Black, an identity theft gone completely off the rails, and so much more. Sarah jolts awake to the rhythmic clatter of the train, the metallic screech of the tracks echoing her own isolation. Her return doesn't offer the comfort she sought. From a cold payphone, she calls Mistress S, pleading to speak with her daughter Kira. The rejection on the other end is sharp, leaving Sarah with the crushing frustration of an estranged mother out of options. On the station platform, fate intervenes in a tragic display. Sarah notices a woman, elegant yet visibly distraught, who removes her shoes and handbag with ritualistic calm. When the stranger turns, shock paralyzes Sarah. The woman's face is a mirror image of her own. Before a word can be exchanged, the stranger steps onto the tracks and takes her own life. Horror quickly gives way to survival instinct. Driven by desperate need, Sarah snatches the discarded bag and flees. In a public restroom, the identity of Elizabeth Childs is dissected. Sarah finds cash, keys, and an opportunity. Meeting her foster brother Felix, she lays out the plan. Sell the cocaine she stole from her abusive ex, Vic, and use the dead woman's money to disappear with Kira. For Sarah, morality is a luxury she can't afford. The discovery of a loaded bank account solidifies her choice. She isn't just going to rob Beth, she's going to become Beth. The transformation is physical and perilous. Dyed hair, a practiced accent, a mimicked posture. At the bank, Sarah plays the part with the confidence of someone with nothing to lose, manipulating the manager to access the funds. But Beth's world is far more complex than it appears. The police intercept her, and Sarah realizes too late that she has stepped into the life of a detective facing internal investigations. Dragged to the precinct by Beth's partner, Art, she navigates a minefield, faking a sudden breakdown to buy time. Meanwhile, Felix identifies Beth's body as Sarah's, sealing the ruse. Now, Sarah is trapped in a double life, forced to live with Beth's boyfriend, Paul. Intimacy with him becomes a dangerous game of deception. The situation turns surreal as Sarah watches her own funeral from a distance. Seeing Vic weep for her stirs a strange mix of revulsion and pity, but there is no time for reflection. Returning to Beth's car, a German woman named Katja breaks in. She is also a ringer for Sarah. Katja's panic is palpable as she rambles about scientists and imminent danger. Suddenly, a gunshot shatters the glass, killing Katja instantly. Sarah floored it, heart racing, fleeing an invisible assassin. In the passenger seat, a phone rings. It isn't hers, and it isn't Beth's. Trembling, Sarah decides to answer. The voice on the other end delivers cold, precise orders, indifferent to Sarah's terror.
Beth? What?
German's dead.
Dead?
Yeah, someone shot her right in front of me.
Oh, Jesus.
With an identical corpse in the back seat, the weight of her reality begins to settle. Survival requires nerves of steel. Sarah drives to a secluded spot and performs the macabre task of burying Katja, stealing her ID and covering her tracks. The earth hides the body, but it cannot bury the mounting questions. Back at Felix's apartment, the tension is thick. He is furious, having spent the drug money on the fake wake. Sarah tries to justify the chaos, revealing Katja's existence, only to realize the money she stole from Beth is gone. Art, Beth's partner, has confiscated the funds, suspecting his partner was planning to skip out on her pending hearing. To get the money back and escape with Kira, Sarah realizes she can't just play Beth, she has to clear the dead detective's name. Sarah dives into the files of Beth's shooting case. Meeting Art, she lies with terrifying ease, weaving file facts into the performance of a lifetime. She discovers that Art protected Beth by tampering with the crime scene, making them accomplices in a dangerous lie. Art's loyalty is built on a secret shared with a woman who no longer exists. Seeking answers, Sarah follows Katja's leads to a hotel. The room is is tossed. The scene of a frantic search. She finds a mutilated doll and a Bible marked with the word truth. Fear becomes tangible. Whoever is hunting these women is always one step behind. The clues lead Sarah to the quiet suburbs, a stark contrast to her chaotic life. She observes Allison Hendricks, another lookalike, living the soccer mom dream. Their confrontation is tense. Allison doesn't offer a hug. She offers a knife in paranoia. To her, Sarah is a glitch in the system that needs to be contained. Allison refuses to give easy answers, using her suspicion as a shield. With no money and the doors closing in, Sarah uses the only tool she has left: blackmail. She confronts Beth's psychiatrist, threatening to expose illegal prescriptions unless she is cleared for duty. The doctor folds. Sarah wins the battle, but the war is just beginning. That night, following Allison's instructions, Sarah heads to the suburban house. The atmosphere feels like an ambush. Allison meets her armed, but the real surprise emerges from the shadows. Another identical woman appears. It's not just 2 or 3. Sarah realizes with growing dread that her individual existence is an illusion. She is part of something much larger, and now there is no turning back. The meeting between the 3 identical women brings no relief, only more questions. In Allison's picture-perfect suburbia, paranoia reigns supreme. Cosima tries to explain the science behind their existence. Allison struggles to maintain order in her controlled life, and Sarah just wants an out. Distrust is the only currency here. When Felix is caught snooping around the neighborhood, the tension explodes into an armed standoff.
Shoot me, please.
Why are
Do
you
not
here?
shoot, please.
Addison, Addison. Put it down. Get out of the way. He's with me. Okay?
Sarah realizes, bitterly, that she cannot demand answers without offering loyalty in return. Back at the precinct, Sarah's nightmare becomes literal. Katya's body, which she buried in haste, has been found. The dead woman rises from the earth as silent proof of crimes Sarah didn't commit but covered up. Panic is cold and immediate. If the corpse's prints match hers, the game is over. She must erase her tracks within the lion's den, manipulating digital evidence while Art watches her every move with growing suspicion. He senses a change in his partner. His copper instincts are a constant alarm that Sarah desperately tries to muffle. To survive in Beth's skin, Sarah must learn to act like her, including how to shoot. Surprisingly, Allison becomes her teacher. Amidst dolls and manicured lawns, one sister teaches the other how to kill. It's a moment of distorted connection where the bizarre becomes mundane. Sarah discovers that the funds she stole actually belonged to Allison. Savings meant to protect them all. Guilt is a new and uncomfortable feeling. At home, the tension with Paul reaches a breaking point. Their relationship is a minefield, oscillating between cold suspicion and a dangerous attraction that blurs identity lines even further. The hunt for the killer leads Art and Sarah to an abandoned building, following breadcrumbs left on purpose. The confrontation is inevitable. Sarah stalks the shadow that has been decoying women with her face. In the dark, the revelation cuts deeper than a blade. The killer is another copy, Helena. She doesn't kill for money, but for a twisted religious crusade. Sarah is wounded but strikes back with brutality, impaling the woman who should be her sister with a rebar. Helena flees, leaving behind blood and a macabre promise of return. Art, relieved his partner is alive and regretful of his harshness, finally hands over the money he withheld. Freedom is in Sarah's hands. She rushes to get Kira, ready to run and leave this madness behind. But watching her daughter from a distance, safe and happy in Mistress S's arms, Sarah's courage falters. A mother's love requires terrible sacrifices. Sometimes, protecting those you love means staying away. Sarah retreats into the shadows, money in her pocket, but her heart empty. Helena, wounded but alive, stitches herself up like a cornered animal, her obsession with Sarah only growing. She invades the fringes of Sarah's life, not with immediate physical violence, but with disturbing psychological games. The noose tightens when a child witness at the precinct points at Sarah, identifying her as the angry angel seen at the crime scene. Beth Child's mask is slipping fast, and Art is dangerously close to the truth. Sarah finds herself cornered, needing to be in 2 crucial places at once. A supervised visit with Kira is her only shot at getting her daughter back, but Helena demands an immediate meeting under threat. The unthinkable happens. Sarah asks Allison to swap places. The rigid housewife dons a leather jacket and a punk attitude to fool Mistress S. It's a desperate, ironic performance. Allison manages to deceive the foster grandmother, but Kira Sarah, with the pure intuition only children possess, recognizes the switch instantly. The girl accepts the strange aunt, keeping the secret with a knowing smile. Blood speaks louder than appearances. While the swap is in play, Helena infiltrates the precinct, dressed with impunity. As Beth, she profanes Art's sacred space, tossing desks and leaving a trail of silent chaos. Her audacity is terrifying. Sarah follows the killer's trail to the apartment of Maggie Chin, a woman Beth shot and killed some time ago. There, she finds Helena. There is no hate in the killer's eyes, only a warped devotion. Helena truly believes they have a special connection, that Sarah is different from the other sheep that must be slaughtered. When Art arrives on the scene, about to kick the door down, Sarah makes an impulsive decision that defies police logic. Instead of handing over the killer and clearing her name, she lets Helena escape through the window. Protecting the secret of the clones has become more vital than justice.
You do feel it.
Art storms the apartment and finds Sarah alone, shaking. The lie has become unsustainable. Sarah realizes she can't keep pretending to be a homicide detective while being hunted by her own reflection. She resigns, trying to cut ties with the force before the handcuffs end up on her own wrists. But leaving the game isn't that simple. Far away, Helena is rescued from the streets by a shadowy figure, a man carrying the same mysterious symbol found on the murder weapon. The conspiracy is much larger than Sarah imagined. She saved her skin for today, but the shadows around her are lengthening, and escape seems less like a real option every day. The illusion of safety begins to physically crumble. Sarah wakes from a nightmare, not with images, but with a terrifying tactile sensation. Checking her own mouth, she spits out a small electronic device and finds a fresh injection mark. It wasn't a dream. Someone drugged her and implanted a monitor while she slept. Paranoia stops being a theory and becomes cold metallic evidence in the palm of her hand. The discovery sends shockwaves through the sisters. Cosima analyzes the device and confirms the worst. It's a medical monitoring electrode. The conclusion is devastating, especially for Allison. If Beth was being watched this closely, the men they sleep with aren't just partners, they are spies. Paul isn't just a distant boyfriend, he is Beth's jailer. For Allison, suspicion immediately falls on Donnie, turning her perfect home into a silent battlefield where every object could hide a secret. Sarah needs the truth, and passivity isn't in her nature. She tracks Paul to his job, infiltrating his office under the guise of Beth. It's a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Paul tries to seduce her, but his touch now carries the weight of betrayal. However, it's a physical detail that nearly destroys everything. Paul notices the absence of a scar on her neck. Sarah's mask begins to peel, and doubt takes root in his eyes. He knows the woman in his arms isn't the same one from a few weeks ago. While Sarah dances on the edge of the abyss, the ghosts of her old life refuse to stay dead. Vic, mutilated and desperate after losing a finger to drug debts, crosses paths with Allison in the suburbs. He sees Sarah's face and pursues her, forcing the housewife to use violence to escape. Sarah's chaos is infecting all their lives, blurring the lines between hunter and prey. The tension explodes back at Beth's apartment. Paul corners Sarah, demanding answers about the scar and her erratic behavior. Guns are drawn. There is no more room for elaborate lies. At gunpoint, Sarah confesses the impossible truth. Beth is dead, and they are identical. But the revelation brings an unexpected twist. Paul lowers his guard, not out of relief, but defeat. He confesses he was blackmailed into monitoring Beth, trapped in his own web of military secrets. Two liars face each other, realizing they might be the only people they can actually trust. Allison's paranoia reaches an irreversible boiling point. Convinced Donnie is her monitor, she crosses every moral line, knocking her own husband out and dragging him to the basement. The suburban housewife transforms into a torturer, using crafting tools to extract the truth. Meanwhile, upstairs, life continues with cruel irony. Neighbors begin arriving for a monthly party, forcing Allison to maintain appearances while her husband is bound just a few yards away. Allison's plea for help forces Sarah to abandon her fragile truce with Paul and dive into the theater of suburban absurdism. She arrives to find a nightmare scene, Donnie tied up and Allison on the verge of a nervous breakdown, oscillating between the perfect hostess and a ruthless interrogator. Sarah takes charge, donning Allison's clothes to circulate among the guests, smiling and serving drinks while trying to keep her sister's world from collapsing entirely. But chaos has a way of attracting attracting more chaos. Vic, following Felix's digital trail, crashes the party, bringing his crude violence to the manicured lawn. The situation spirals out of control when Paul shows up. Following Sarah, what could have been a disaster becomes a strange alignment of interests. Paul, now aware of Sarah's duplicate nature, intervenes with military precision. He neutralizes Vic and helps maintain the ruse, proving his loyalty may have shifted.
Let's stand. I'm not gonna hurt you.
The alliance between the Monitor and the Imposter is forged in the crossfire. In the basement, the truth about Donnie finally comes to light, and it is pathetically human. He isn't a spy for a grand conspiracy, just a man with banal secrets and letters from an old flame. Allison's humiliation is total. She destroyed her marriage over a ghost that didn't exist. Sarah, exhausted, leaves the suburbs with a bitter lesson. Sometimes, fear causes more damage than the real enemy. Meanwhile, far from the domestic turmoil, Cosima is playing with fire. Her intellectual fascination with Dr. Leakey and her attraction to the French student Delphine lead her into the heart of neo-Lucianist ideology. She believes she's investigating, but in a quiet hotel room, Delphine reports everything back to Leakey. The scientist, who prides herself on her intellect, doesn't realize she just let the enemy into her heart. The tension surrounding Paul reaches unsustainable levels. Summoned by Olivier, he finds himself trapped in a circular interrogation about Beth's death, forced to lie to protect Sarah while his own loyalty is tested. Sarah, helpless on the other side of a computer screen, feels the weight of not knowing who to trust. Paranoia spreads like a virus. Cosima insists the only way out is to engage the enemy, drawing dangerously close to Delphine, while Sarah sees only risk. To her, trust is a luxury clones can't afford. Meanwhile, the police investigation takes a perilous turn. Katya's body, the Jane Doe, is revealed to share the same DNA as the killer, creating a forensic paradox that Art and his partner cannot ignore. Art's certainty in Beth's integrity begins to waver in the face of physical evidence. The lie sustaining Sarah's life is being eroded by science. In a disturbing diner meeting, Sarah comes face to face with Helena. The killer devours food with animal hunger, contrasting her brutality with a childlike neediness. Helena doesn't just want to kill, she seeks a distorted connection, believing Sarah is different from the others. But the truce is brief and violent. Under the table, threats are made, and Helena issues a deadly ultimatum: names in exchange for lives.
You have until midnight to tell me the names.
The line between Predator and Lost Sister grows increasingly thin. The situation explodes when Paul, realizing Sarah's cover has been blown by the neo-Lucianists, orders her to run. But Sarah, driven by fierce loyalty and corrosive guilt, refuses to abandon him. Instead of running, she dives into the lion's den, infiltrating Olivier's club. In a desperate act of improvisation, she uses Helena's obsession as a weapon, luring the fanatic to the same location. Inside the club, Olivier's illusion of control crumbles. He captures Sarah, but underestimates Helena's brutality, who confuses their identities in the shadows of the chaos. The confrontation isn't just physical, it's a visceral revenge. Helena, following distorted orders from her handler Tomas, mutilates Olivier, cutting off the tail that symbolized his position in the neo-Lucianist hierarchy. It's an act of purifying violence that allows Sarah and Paul to narrowly escape, but victory is fleeting. While Sarah tries to catch her breath and process the carnage, reality outside the clone underworld moves forward relentlessly. At the precinct, technology finally catches up to the ruse. Sarah Manning's fingerprints and Elizabeth Child's file appear side by side on the computer screen. Two names, two pasts, but the same face. The secret Sarah fought so hard to protect has just become the most incriminating evidence of all. The discovery at the precinct changes everything. Art and Angela are no longer just investigating a suspicious suicide. They are facing a mystery that defies logic. The face of Sarah Manning, a criminal supposedly dead, is identical to the detective they knew. The identity confusion is no longer Sarah's secret, it's a police manhunt. The net closes in, and the relative safety of Felix's loft becomes the only possible refuge for Sarah and Paul, who are now fugitives in their own city. In the suburbs, Allison's veneer of perfection finally cracks. The couple's retreat healed nothing. It only deepened end her despair. Feeling watched and manipulated, she decides that if her life is going to fall apart, it will be on her own terms. Her rivalry with Ainsley shifts from passive-aggressive to open warfare. In an act of self-destructive revenge, Allison seduces her neighbor's husband in a public parking lot. It isn't love, or even lust, but a frantic attempt to regain control by inflicting pain. When the physical confrontation finally happens on the street, under the eyes of the neighbors, Allison's dignity is the final casualty. Meanwhile, the web of lies around Cosima tightens. Delphine, torn between her duty to Dr. Leakey and her growing feelings, finds the definitive proof: a detailed list of the clones and, worse, data on Kira. The betrayal happens in the silence of the apartment while Cosima sleeps, oblivious to the fact that the intimacy she prizes is the tool of her surveillance. Leakey, ruthless, cleans up loose ends, ordering the cold execution of Olivier in the hospital, proving that failure is not tolerated in directed evolution. The pressure forces Sarah to seek answers in the past. Siobhan, confronted by the truth about the clones, reveals fragments of a dark story about how Sarah came to her through clandestine networks. But the past has to wait, as present danger knocks on the door. Literally, Art, following digital leads, tracks Beth's cell phone to Felix's loft. The collision between Beth's police life and Sarah's reality is imminent. But the true horror doesn't come from the police or the scientists. At Siobhan's house, Kira sees something the adults, blinded by their fears, miss: Helena. The connection between the child and the killer is immediate and inexplicable, devoid of fear. When Kira runs into the street to meet the woman with her mother's face, Sarah's protective instinct flares. She runs, she screams, but fate is faster. In a second, conspiracies, clones, and lies stop mattering. The only thing left is a mother watching her worst nightmare come true on the cold asphalt. At the hospital, the impossible happens. Kira, struck violently by a car, shows only minor scrapes. The doctors are baffled, but for Sarah, immediate relief quickly gives way to a new and terrifying suspicion. The biology that makes them clones may have passed something extraordinary and dangerous to the next generation. Meanwhile, the hunt continues. Helena isn't dead but imprisoned on a ship, caged like an animal by Tomas. He despises her for failing, but Helena, in her fractured mind, believes Sarah and Kira are her family. Her loyalty is warped, but real. Far away, Allison tries to manically regain control of her life. At Felix's loft, she cleans and organizes compulsively, trying to sterilize the chaos of her own existence. But the past comes knocking. An intervention organized by Ainsley and Donnie awaits her at home. What should have been a moment of humiliation for Allison turns into a brutal counterattack. Cornered, she exposes her neighbor's dirty secrets, destroying Ainsley's reputation and ending the meeting with chilling coldness. Allison won, but at what cost? The pressure on Sarah mounts when Paul reappears with an offer of truce from Dr. Leakey. The leader of Neolution proposes a deal: Sarah's freedom and the safety of her family in exchange for Helena. It's a deal with the devil, but Sarah needs answers. Art's police investigation finally crosses the line of legality. Reviewing old security footage, he sees the exact moment of Beth's suicide and realizes the identity swap. The woman he's been protecting isn't his partner. Sarah's mask has fallen. At the docks, the final confrontation takes shape. Sarah finds Helena caged, vulnerable, and for the first time, she doesn't see a monster. She sees a reflection of herself. With her gun aimed at her sister, Sarah hesitates. The genetic bond speaks louder than fear. She frees Helena, and when Tomas tries to intervene, the sisters' fury turns against their creator. They leave the ship together, united by blood and trauma. But the biggest revelation awaits at Siobhan's house. A woman named Amelia emerges from the shadows, claiming to be the biological mother of them both. She reveals the cruel truth. Sarah and Helena weren't accidents, but the products of a surrogate pregnancy for scientists, handed over to opposite fates, one to the state, the other to the church. Sarah's orphanhood was never a rejection, but a survival strategy. The family reunion in Mistress S's basement is brief and fraught with tension. Amelia attempts to explain her daughter's origins, but suspicion hangs heavy in the air. Siobhan rifles through Amelia's belongings and discovers an old photograph suggesting the birth mother knows far more about the scientists than she lets on. Before the pieces can fall into place, reality shatters their sanctuary. Art, armed with the truth and a warrant, breaches the house. Chaos erupts. hours, Sarah is arrested, dragged away from Kira, while a desperate and agile Helena escapes through the window, vanishing into the night. At the precinct, Art isn't just looking for answers. He wants justice for Beth. He grills Sarah, using Kira's safety as leverage. Just as she is about to confess, in a moment of vulnerability, Sarah is saved by a more powerful and sinister force. Daniel, a ruthless corporate lawyer working for Leaky, secures her immediate release. Sarah isn't being led to freedom, however. She is being taken to meet the true face of power. She is introduced to Rachel Duncan, a pro-clone raised with full self-awareness. Educated and cold, Rachel holds a high-ranking position within the Dyad Institute. She delivers an ultimatum disguised as a negotiation: sign a contract, surrender her biology, and submit to the organization in exchange for protection. It's not an invitation, it's custody. While Allison considers signing her own contract to keep her suburban life intact, fate offers a cruel way out. During an argument in the garage, Ainsley's scarf gets caught in the garbage disposal. Allison watches her rival choke, pleading for help. In a decisive moment, Allison chooses inertia. She watches the life drain from Ainsley's eyes, letting death solve her problem. The picture-perfect housewife now has blood on her hands, not by action, but by omission.
Ainsley?
Cosima, battling her own mysterious illness, makes the most devastating discovery of all. While decoding the synthetic genetic sequences in her DNA with Delphine's help, she realizes the sequence isn't biological, it's legal, it's a patent. In the eyes of their creators, they aren't people, they are intellectual property. The final tragedy unfolds in a grim warehouse. Sarah arrives too late to save Amelia, who has been brutally stabbed by Helena. The assassin feels betrayed, believing she was sold out by her own mother. The confrontation between the sisters is inevitable and painful. Helena, who couldn't bring herself to kill Sarah before, now hesitates. But Sarah, driven by the need to protect Kira at any cost, doesn't make the same mistake twice. A shot rings out, and Helena falls. Sarah kills her own half to save her daughter, but the sacrifice may have been in vain. Returning to Siobhan's house, hoping to find Kira and flee, Sarah finds only silence. The house has been ransacked. Siobhan and Kira are gone. Sarah is alone, and the war has only just begun. Relentless rain lashes down on Sarah, mirroring the chaos in her mind. Desperation drives her through the wet streets, searching for any connection to her sisters, but the silence on the other end of the line is deafening. Drenched and breathless, she seeks refuge in a diner, trying to reorder the pieces of a losing game. But the enemy is always one step ahead. The phone rings. Not with Paul's voice, but with Rachel's cold demand for surrender.
Simply surrender yourself. Rachel, you bitch.
Me and Kira are not in bloody so.
Before Sarah can process the threat, violence erupts in the small establishment. Armed men emerge. The sound of gunfire shatters the calm, and in the confusion, survival instinct takes over. Sarah narrowly escapes, leaving behind bodies and unanswered questions. She finds Felix at a bar, numbed by substances and oblivious to the world collapsing outside. The news that Kira and Mistress S were taken by Rachel cuts through the air like a blade. Sarah's grief is palpable, but there's no time to mourn. They must act. Meanwhile, Cosima dives into her own biology, handing blood samples to Delphine, trying to turn her illness into a weapon or a cure, oscillating between trust and the fear of being just another experiment. In the suburbs, Allison grapples with her own demons. Guilt over the neighbor she watched die blends with constant paranoia. The perfect housewife now grips an illegal firearm provided by shady contacts, ready to defend the little control she has left. With the reluctant help of Paul, who plays a dangerous game between corporate loyalty and guilt, Sarah discovers that Rachel plans to take Kira out of the country. A suicide mission is hatched. To enter the lion's den, Sarah must become Cosima. Donning glasses, a lab coat, and her sister's intellectual posture, she infiltrates a Dyad gala. The tension is suffocating. Every step inside the institute is an acting test where one slip-up means losing everything. She deceives Leaky, but the final confrontation with Rachel reveals a devastating truth. The cold executive doesn't have Kira. Sarah's rage boils over. The physical confrontation is brief and brutal, but the victory is hollow. If Rachel doesn't have her daughter, who does? The answer emerges from the shadows of Art's investigation. The Prolithians, religious fanatics who view the clones as abominations, are making their move. And at the hospital, a dark miracle occurs. Helena survives. Wounded but alive, she draws the attention of silent predators. The episode closes with a chilling image. Kira, far from home, being dressed and photographed like a doll. A prisoner of a force even more sinister than the corporation. Miracles aren't always divine. Sometimes they are just the stubborn persistence of life. In the hospital, Helena breathes against all odds, a medical anomaly that baffles doctors and attracts unwanted eyes. Meanwhile, Sarah and Art follow Kira's digital trail, a desperate hunt that leads them to a recently abandoned motel room. Children's drawings left behind are ghosts of a recent presence. Sarah's frustration grows. She feels like she's chasing smoke. The search leads her out of the city into rural isolation where silence hides old secrets. Sarah is ambushed, thrown into the trunk of a car, only to be freed by a familiar and fierce figure, Mistress S.
Where is she? Piece of shit. Stop. Bloody hell.
The reunion isn't one of relief, but of tension. Siobhan wasn't kidnapped, she fled. To her, Sarah brought the storm to her doorstep, and the only way to protect Kira was to disappear through an old network of contacts, the Birdwatchers. In an isolated house in the woods, under the care of old war buddies Brenda and Barry, the trio tries to breathe. But the calm is deceptive. Trust, for people like them, is a dangerous luxury. Meanwhile, suburban life continues its macabre march. At Ainsley's funeral, Allison struggles to maintain her mask of normalcy, but paranoia frays her edges. She suspects her husband Donnie is her monitor. Grief mixes with domestic espionage as she tries to prove his betrayal, turning her home into an emotional minefield. At Dyad, temptation takes the form of progress. Leaky offers Cosima a state-of-the-art laboratory. It's a scientist's dream, but the price is her soul. Accepting means working for her creator, blurring the line between researcher and property. At the rural hideout, Siobhan, a veteran of past conflicts, senses something is wrong. Brenda and Barry's hospitality has a bitter aftertaste. When Sarah tries to flee with Kira in the dead of night, the trap snaps shut. The old friends have sold the girl out, ideology lost to Prolithian money. The betrayal runs deep, but Siobhan's response is final. In a burst of necessary violence, she eliminates her former allies without hesitation. Family is forged in blood, and Siobhan proves she will kill anyone to protect her own. Far away, Helena's fate takes a dark turn. Rescued from the hospital by Mark, she is taken to Henrik's farm. There, science merges with religious fanaticism. Henrik doesn't see Helena as a person, but as a fascinating biological error to be corrected and utilized. He executes Helena's old mentor, signaling the end of the old guard and the beginning of a new era of calculated horrors. Sarah, Felix, and Kira flee down a dark highway, free for now, but aware there is no safe place left in the world. Fire consumes the Birdwatchers' refuge, turning the only safety net left to ash. When Henrik and his followers reach the wreckage, they find only corpses, but failure does not deter fanaticism. If they cannot have the child, they will settle for what they already possess, Helena. The flight of Sarah, Felix, and Kira is an endless road, marked by scarcity and the constant fear of being tracked. No credit cards, no identity, they survive through petty theft, a lesson in distorted morality that Kira learns all too quickly. Seeking shelter, they break into an empty summer cottage, a temporary luxury amidst the chaos. But peace is a fragile illusion. That night, the cabin door opens. Sarah prepares for the worst, only to find a face from the past, Cal Morrison.
Sarah? You know him?
The reunion is tense, weighted with untold stories and old stings. When Kira enters the room, the resemblance is undeniable, and Sarah's silence confirms what Cal already suspects. He isn't just a victim of her past cons, he is the father. The dynamic shifts instantly. Cal doesn't kick the intruders out, he offers protection, something Sarah desperately needs but fears to accept. Meanwhile, in the suburbs, Allison's world crumbles under the weight of pills and paranoia. Her musical's opening night approaches, but reality reality is dissolving. She sees monitors on every corner, including a new detective, Angela, who is trying to infiltrate her life. On stage during the performance, Allison's body gives out. She collapses in front of the audience, a literal and metaphorical fall, witnessed by Felix and Donnie. The mask of the perfect housewife is finally shattered. Far away at the Prolithian farm, a different horror takes shape. Helena, drugged and dressed in white, is the centerpiece of a grotesque ceremony. Henrik doesn't just seek submission, he seeks divine procreation. He carries her like a sacrificial bride. Helena, the fierce assassin, is helpless, surrounded by devout smiles, hiding terrible intentions. The tranquility at Cal's cabin is destroyed when Daniel, Dyad's cleaner, locates Sarah. Violence erupts quickly. Daniel ignores Kira and focuses on his primary target. Cal, armed with a rifle, protects his daughter but cannot stop Sarah from being taken. Daniel's getaway is ruthless. He executes a local cop who crosses his path without a second thought. Sarah is trapped in the driver's seat, at the mercy of a man who kills with the coldness of someone filing a form. But fate intervenes with brutality. At a blind intersection, Daniel's car is broadsided by a truck, turning the kidnapping into smoking wreckage.
With this.
She's your daughter.
You touch her, and I will bury you.
Just drive.
Amidst twisted metal and shattered glass, Sarah wakes up. Daniel appears dead beside her. Luck, or perhaps sheer persistence, gives her a second chance. She escapes the wreckage and returns to the only safety she knows, Cal and Kira. But there's no time to heal. The revelation that Daniel worked for Dyad and answered directly to Rachel changes the game. Cal, revealing his own corporate secrets and technical skills, decides not only to hide Sarah, but to help her strike back. In a cold, sterile rehab clinic, Allison wakes up to a new nightmare. It's not Dyad holding her captive, but Donnie. He uses her fragility and the theater collapse as a weapon, threatening to take custody of the children if she tries to leave. Allison, always the one in control, finds herself cornered by her own family. Where there once was paranoia, there is now a real prison. At the farm, Helena's indomitable nature resurfaces. Gracie, driven by jealousy and disgust, tries to smother the abomination in her sleep. It is a fatal mistake. Helena wakes, overpowers her aggressor, and flees through the halls. Fragmented memories of invasive medical procedures flood her mind as she runs. A mix of past trauma and present violation. She escapes into the woods, a wounded predator loose in the world once more. Sarah and Cal's investigation leads them to the origins of Project Mistress. The mythology of twins and gods blends with military science. Determined to find answers, Sarah breaks into Rachel's apartment. What she finds there shakes her convictions. Home videos show a young Rachel, happy and loved by her adoptive parents, the Duncans. The cold corporate pro-clone wasn't always a monster. She was made this way by loss. However, Daniel didn't die in the crash. Wounded and furious, he surprises Sarah in the apartment. This time, there will be no transport, only pain. He binds her in the shower, prepping his tools with sadistic calm, promising to extract every secret with a razor blade. He makes the first cut, and Sarah's blood runs. But the sound of a struggle echoes from the next room. Daniel goes to investigate, and silence falls, followed by the thud of a body. The shower curtain pulled back. Standing before a terrified Sarah is Helena. She wears her wedding dress, now soaked in the blood of Daniel, who lies with his throat slit. The sister who was supposed to be her enemy becomes her savior. Helena, confused and vulnerable, embraces Sarah and whispers, "They took something from inside me." As the sisters reunite at the crime scene, Henrik watches through a microscope back at the farm. The cell divides. The experiment was a success. A new life, created from science and Helena's stolen eggs, begins to grow.
And a new life begins.
Rachel's apartment has become a brutal crime scene. Blood stains the pristine environment, a violent reminder of Helena's fury. While the police and Dyad scrub the mess, Rachel arrives, cold and pragmatic. She looks at the body of Daniel, her loyal enforcer, and doesn't shed a tear. To her, Daniel's failure to protect her is unforgivable, and Leakey's incompetence allowed it to happen. The power dynamic shifts instantly. Rachel takes total control, demoting Leakey and taking Paul as her new personal monitor. monitor. The war against Sarah is now personal, and the first victim is Cosima. Rachel orders the immediate suspension of her treatment. Until Sarah surrenders, her scientist sister must suffer. Meanwhile, Sarah tries to manage the family chaos. She brings Helena to Felix's apartment, but the cohabitation is unsustainable. Felix, terrified of having a psychotic assassin on his couch, refuses to accept this new dynamic. Despite Sarah's pleas for empathy, reminding him that Helena is also family, the tension is palpable. Sarah decides to move Helena to a safer, more isolated location, Detective Art's apartment. There, amidst food and clumsy attempts at communication, Helena lets slip fragments of her traumatic past and mentions a mysterious swan man who keeps secrets in a locker. At Dyad, Leaky tries to save his own skin. He approaches Cosima with a peace offering, claiming that the original Project Mistress data was lost in a fire years ago, killing the founding scientists. He offers to continue Cosima's treatment behind Rachel's back, a gesture that reeks more of manipulation than benevolence. The pressure on Sarah reaches a breaking point. Paul, now acting under Rachel's direct orders, makes a vile move. He breaches Felix's apartment, interrupts an intimate moment, and plants the gun used in the cop's murder, framing Sarah's brother.
What are you doing? Are you crazy? What are you doing? I'm sorry.
The message is clear: surrender or Felix goes to prison for homicide. Desperate and cornered, Sarah teams up with Art to follow the clues Helena left behind. They discover a storage locker belonging to Maggie Chen, filled with evidence of a life dedicated to tracking the clones. Among photos and documents, a connection emerges. Rachel's adoptive father, Ethan Duncan, might be alive, but the discovery comes too late. Helena has slipped away from Art and is positioned in a building across from Rachel's, a sniper rifle trained on the window where the executive is seducing Paul. At the last second, Sarah bursts in on Helena. She isn't there to save Rachel, but to save what humanity is left in her sister. Sarah begs her, arguing that killing Rachel won't solve anything and will only take Felix away from them forever. Helena, finger on the trigger, hesitates. The family bond speaks louder than the bloodlust. She lowers the weapon. Sarah uses the new information as a bargaining chip. In a tense meeting at a bar, she hands Leaky proof that Ethan Duncan may be alive. In exchange, Felix's freedom is guaranteed, and Cosima's treatment is resumed, but peace is temporary. In the car, fleeing the city, Helena whispers their next destination. The answer to everything lies in a place called Cold River. The road offers temporary refuge, but it doesn't silence the ghosts. Sarah and Helena head toward Cold River, camping under the stars. It's a rare moment of calm. Helena, away from the violence, clumsily tries to connect with Sarah. She asks about motherhood, about the possibility of having her own children, revealing a deep and painful longing for normalcy. Sarah, however, remains vigilant. She knows that trust between them is fragile, built on a foundation of shared trauma. While they sleep, Paul tracks them, rifling through their belongings for clues to Ethan Duncan's whereabouts. At the rehab clinic, Allison's world continues to shrink. During a group therapy session, her past returns to haunt her in the form of Vic, Sarah's abusive ex-boyfriend. He claims to have found spiritual enlightenment, but his intentions are murky. Vic is acting as an informant for Detective Angela, promising to deliver Allison's dirty secrets in exchange for clearing his own record.
I'll get you your dirt on Allison Hendricks, but my charges go away and I'm done. No, I mean it. I'm done.
Allison's paranoia, once a figment of her imagination, is now justified by real betrayal. In Cold River, Sarah's investigation leads her to a local church, where old files from a psychiatric institute reveal the dark history of eugenics and human experimentation. While Sarah dives into records of pain and death, Helena seeks distraction at a local bar. There she meets Jesse, an ordinary man who treats her not as a freak, but as an interesting woman. They drink, eat, and dance to a slow song. For a few moments, Helena experiences the sweetness of a life denied to her, but violence follows her like a shadow. A bar fight explodes and the police take Helena away, brutally ending her brief fairy tale. At the station, it's not Sarah who shows up to post bail. Gracie and Mark, the Prolithian fanatics, emerge with a sinister smile. They don't offer freedom, but a distorted purpose. Gracie reveals that her father has fertilized Helena's stolen eggs. The promise of reuniting with her babies is the perfect bait. Helena, driven by maternal maternal instinct and loneliness, gets into the car with her captors, trading one prison for another far worse. Meanwhile, Sarah follows the trail of the Swan Man to an isolated house. The door opens to reveal a shocking truth. Mistress S is there, and with her, alive and hidden for decades, is Ethan Duncan. Rachel's father didn't die in the fire. He has been protected by Siobhan all this time. The conversation is cut short by Paul's arrival. Mistress S, armed and fierce, confronts him outside. Inside the house, Ethan reveals the final piece of the puzzle. He and his wife loved Rachel, but Dyad corrupted everything. It wasn't an accident that took Rachel from her parents, it was murder. Dr. Leakey killed Rachel's mother and stole the girl to raise her as a cold, corporate experiment. The true nature of the enemy is finally revealed, and the fallout from this discovery promises to be devastating. At the rehab clinic, isolation begins to break down Allison's defenses. The need for human connection leads her to make a dangerous mistake, trusting Vic. During a craft session, amid scissors and paper, she confesses her darkest sins, admitting her guilty passivity in Ainsley's death. To Allison, it's a release. To Vic, it's a bargaining chip. He wastes no time calling the detective, pressuring him, offering up Allison's secrets for his own freedom. The betrayal is silent but devastating.
No, I'll tell you in person. Listen, DeAngelis, this is not a negotiation. You want Allison Hendricks, you show up tomorrow with my paperwork.
Meanwhile, ethics become blurred in the lab. Cosima undergoes a hopeful procedure, receiving stem cells to treat her degenerative illness. Hope, however, soon turns to horror. Delphine reveals that the cells came from one of Kira's baby teeth, planted intentionally by Dr. Leakey. Cosima feels violated, not just as a patient, but as an aunt. Knowing that a child's body, her niece's, was used as raw material without consent is a line she cannot cross. Mistrust poisons her relationship with Delphine, and Cosima demands she leave. Allison's situation spirals out of control as Family Day approaches. Sarah must intervene drastically to save her sister. With Felix's help, they neutralize Vic before he can talk to the police, leaving him unconscious and out of the picture. Sarah assumes Allison's identity, taking the stage to give a speech. She navigates her sister's suburban world, improvising feelings and participating in group dynamics with Donnie. It's a high-stakes performance where one slip could mean Allison's arrest. However, the charade collapses backstage. Donnie walks into the room and finds both sisters together. The shock is absolute. For the first time, the truth comes out. Donnie has been a monitor for years, reporting on Allison as part of a university study, but he never knew she was a clone. The realization that his entire marriage was built on a corporate lie devastates him. He wasn't a calculating villain, just an ignorant pawn. Corporate tension reaches its peak at Dyad. Rachel, cold and pragmatic, orchestrates Dr. Leakey's downfall. Though he tries to negotiate, Rachel makes it clear his time is up. Knowing he is a marked man, Leakey flees in a panic. In a moment of pure innocence and tragic bravery, Kira overhears her mother's argument and decides to help the only way she can. She ties her own loose tooth to a trailer door and yanks it out, offering it to Sarah with a bloody smile. She just wants her aunts to be okay. On the road, Leakey's escape is interrupted by Donnie. Allison's husband, distraught and holding a gun, demands answers inside the car. He vents about how the scientist ruined his marriage and his life. Leakey, arrogant to the end, dismisses Donnie's pain. It is a fatal error. In a gesture of careless frustration, the gun goes off. Glass shatters, and blood splatters the interior of the vehicle.
Thank you.
I quit!
The man who controlled everything dies not by a grand design, but by an accident born of suburban despair. The web of secrets expands with the abrupt arrival of a new face. Tony, a trans man identical to Sarah in his original biology, emerges fleeing the violence that seems to haunt everyone with the same DNA. His friend Sammy dies in Tony's arms, leaving a cryptic message about Paul being a ghost. When Sarah and Felix meet Tony, the reality of the clones takes on a new dimension. He is another lost sibling, unaware of the conspiracy but intrinsically linked to it. There is an immediate connection, but imminent danger forces Tony to leave, leaving behind more questions than answers. At the Hendricks household, horror transforms into a bizarre form of couples therapy. Allison, returning from rehab, finds a drunken Donnie on the verge of a breakdown. The tension explodes into mutual confessions. Allison admits she let Ainsley die. A trembling Donnie reveals he killed Dr. Leakey and that the body is in the trunk in the garage. garage. Instead of revulsion, the raw truth unites them. Facing the corpse of the man who manipulated their lives, they find a new complicity. They decide to protect one another, turning an accidental crime into an unbreakable marital secret. At Dyad, Rachel plays the cards she has left. She promotes Delphine to Leakey's position and focuses all resources on bringing Ethan Duncan to the lab. The official goal is a cure for Cosima, but Rachel carries a painful personal agenda. The reunion with her adoptive father is fraught with resentment and expectation. In the lab, Cosima works against the clock. Her colleague, Scott, discovers that the genetic data they are studying belongs to Cosima herself. Science ceases to be abstract and becomes a fight for a friend's survival. The atmosphere is one of feverish dedication, with Delphine and Cosima finding a brief moment of reconciliation and love amidst test tubes, getting high and laughing in the face of the abyss. The final emotional confrontation occurs in Rachel's office. She demands to know from Ethan why she cannot have children. Her father's answer is devastating. The infertility wasn't an accident. It was by design. All clones were engineered to be sterile as a control measure.
Rachel, she's a failure, not a success. You are all barren by design.
The revelation shatters Rachel's icy composure. She realizes her existence, her desires, and her body were purposely limited by those who claim to love her. In a fit of impotent rage, she trashes her office, screaming against a biological destiny she cannot change. Meanwhile, the fragility of life manifests brutally in the lab. Cosima, who had just found hope in collaborating with Ethan, begins to cough violently. Blood stains the floor as she suffers a seizure. The brilliant mind seeking a cure collapses under the weight of her own flawed biology, leaving everyone around her paralyzed by the fear of imminent loss. In the well-manicured suburbs where Allison lives, secrets are buried deep, sometimes literally. In the Hendricks garage, the horror of an accidental murder turns into a macabre household chore. Allison and Donnie, united by panic and necessity, drag Dr. Leakey's body. Where there was once distance and lies, there is now a grotesque complicity. As they jackhammer the concrete to create a makeshift grave, fear gives way to a strange intimacy. They are no longer just husband and wife, they are partners in crime. Far away, at the Prolithian farm, Henrik continues his genetic experiments, implanting an embryo into Helena. The normally ferocious assassin accepts the procedure with an unnerving, almost maternal calm, but Henrik's depravity knows no bounds. He decides that his own daughter Gracie must also bear fruit. Meanwhile, the countdown for Cosima accelerates. Her lungs are failing, and the only hope lies in Kira's bone marrow. It is an impossible decision for a mother, but Sarah understands that without Cosima, their fight is lost. Kira, with a bravery far beyond her years, accepts the pain to save her auntie.
Sleep tight, monkey.
In the lab, Ethan Duncan and Scott try to decipher ancient genetic codes, seeking a permanent cure amidst obsolete floppies and mental encryption. Tension explodes in Allison's garage when Vic, Sarah's troubled ex, shows up prying. Donnie, empowered by the adrenaline of his recent actions, defends his territory with a gun in hand and a cold threat on his lips. The suburban couple finally cements the hole in the floor, sealing their secret. Over Leakey's grave, their passion reignites, bonded by shared danger. At the farm, Helena's patience ends. When Henrik locks Gracie up, Helena strikes with the brutality life taught her. She frees the girl, and without looking back, leaves a trail of destruction. Henrik's empire of fanaticism goes up in flames, a purifying fire that lights up the night as Helena watches, triumphant and free. But the victory is short-lived. In a pediatric clinic, while Sarah deals with warnings of imminent betrayal, the enemy attacks using the cruelest weapon of all, Sarah's own face. Rachel, disguised as her sister, enters Kira's room. Corporate coldness trumps maternal instinct. When the real Sarah arrives, she finds only an empty room and the echo of a nightmare that has just begun again. Despair has a bitter taste, and Sarah Manning tastes it as she walks into the lion's den. With Kira in Dyad's hands, there is no room for complex plans or daring escapes, only unconditional surrender. Sarah surrenders her body and her freedom to Dr. Nealon, signing contracts that reduce her to biological property, all for a chance to see her daughter. The institution is cold, sterile, and designed to break the human spirit. But a mother's love is a variable Rachel's science cannot quantify. In the halls of Dyad, Rachel consolidates her power with surgical cruelty. She dispatches Delphine to Germany, isolating Cosima at her most vulnerable moment. But Rachel is also human, wounded by a past that hasn't healed. She seeks validation from her father, Ethan Duncan, demanding the key to the synthetic genetic sequence. Duncan, however, sees the monster the corporation created. In a final act of defiance and protection, he chooses death, taking his secrets with him and leaving Rachel devastated, screaming over the body of the man she just found and lost again.
Deserve me anymore.
Rachel's grief turns into blind fury. She destroys the bone marrow intended to cure Cosima, condemning her sister to death out of pure spite. But Sarah, trapped in the recovery room, exploits her enemy's emotional instability. With improvised ingenuity and necessary brutality, Sarah fires a pencil through Rachel's eye. It is a moment of shocking but liberating violence. With Scott's help and an unexpected ally within Dyad, the escape begins. The reunion at Felix's loft is a brief oasis in a desert of trauma. 4 identical faces, Sarah, Cosima, Allison, and Helena, share the same space. Music plays, and for a moment, fear recedes. They dance. It is a celebration of survival, of individuality within sameness. They are sisters, united not just by biology, but by the fierce love they've developed for one another. Cosima, frail and ill, finds comfort in her sister's arms, reading The Island of Dr. Moreau, where Duncan left one last gift, the key to the cure, hidden in the margins of the book. But peace is a fleeting illusion. While Sarah seeks answers from Marion Bowles, the truth about the most painful betrayal comes to light. Mistress S, in a pragmatic and ruthless maneuver, has negotiated with the military. The price for Sarah and Kira's freedom was the freedom of another sister. Elena is captured, dragged away, betrayed by the one she trusted. At Marion's mansion, reality expands in a terrifying way. Sarah meets Charlotte, a young version of herself, the sole survivor of hundreds of cloning attempts. But the true shock lies in the revelation of Project Castor. Science didn't stop with the women. Marion introduces Sarah to a male clone, a familiar face with a scar and wild eyes. The game has changed completely. They were never the only ones. The Clone War has only just begun. Helena's mind is a treacherous refuge. One moment, she is celebrating life surrounded by sisters and laughter at a baby shower. The next, reality tears through the veil of the dream. She wakes up confined in a cramped box, hearing the hissing voice of an imaginary scorpion, and realizing her freedom has been stolen once again. The testing has resumed, and this time, loneliness is her only companion. Far away, the sea breeze brings no peace for Sarah, only disturbing news. Delphine appears with a living, dangerous revelation. A male clone, Rudy, has been captured. The encounter with him is chilling. Rudy shows no fear. Instead, he displays an intimate and invasive knowledge of Sarah's life, mocking her family and issuing a veiled threat that echoes like thunder. She should count her sisters. The warning proves true when Sarah discovers Helena is missing, and a painful confession from Mistress S reveals the matriarch traded one sister for another in a desperate deal with Paul. Siobhan's betrayal opens a deep wound, but there is no time to bleed. Dyad is under scrutiny from topside, and a cleaner named Ferdinand is on his way to investigate. With Rachel incapacitated and suffering from severe brain damage after Sarah's attack, Delphine proposes a risky pact. If Sarah poses as Rachel to deceive Ferdinand, Delphine will help rescue Helena. Sarah accepts, stepping into her enemy's skin, a disguise that demands absolute coldness. Meanwhile, in the suburbs, Allison faces her own territorial battles. The threat of losing her school district to a political rival awakens a fierce survival instinct. With Donnie unemployed and their finances crumbling, she decides she won't just be a spectator. Allison is going to run for office, whatever the cost. At the heart of Dyad, Sarah's charade nearly crumbles. Ferdinand is not just a bureaucrat. He is a bloodthirsty enforcer who speaks casually of Helsinki, a total clone termination protocol. Tension explodes when Ferdinand, believing he is with his lover Rachel, expects intimacy. Sarah tries to stay in character, but when the threat turns toward Kira and her sisters, maternal instinct overrides the performance. In a fit of blind rage, she strangles Ferdinand with his own belt, turning seduction into a near execution until Delphine intervenes. With Ferdinand's life in their hands, they secure his silence regarding the conspiracy, saving Allison from a cleanup crew already positioned in her garage. But the victory is marred by another daring escape. Rudy is rescued from dyad custody by another male clone, Seth. The embrace between them reveals a terrifying truth. The enemy is not just a lone soldier, but a loyal and lethal brotherhood. Freedom comes with a biological cost for the new players on the board. Rudy and Seth, recently reunited, move through the city like coordinated predators. But there is a flaw in the machinery. Seth suffers from glitches, violent neurological spasms suggesting that Project Castor clones are weapons with a short shelf life. Even so, they continue their mission, using seduction and intimacy to collect genetic data from unsuspecting women, treating affection as a mere method of extraction. In an isolated military compound in the desert, Helena's situation is brutal. Subjected to waterboarding, her resistance is tested to the limit. The violence only ceases with a revelation that changes everything. She is pregnant. Dr. Virginia Cody, a figure who blends clinical authority with a distorted maternal affection, takes charge. To Cody, Helena is no longer a disposable target, but a valuable vessel, and the Castor clones are her boys, sons of a cruel science she protects with fanatical zeal. In the suburbs, financial desperation pushes Allison down dark paths. Determined to maintain her status and fund her political campaign, she sees an opportunity where others would see danger. Allison negotiates to buy the drug business of her former supplier, Ramon. It is a bold maneuver, using trafficking to finance respectability. With Donnie by her side, hesitant but loyal, the Hendrixes dive headfirst into crime, transforming their garage into an illicit operations center under the guise of normalcy. Sarah's search for answers leads her to confront the mortality of her enemies. Cal, seeking to protect the future, buys a safe house for Kira, but war comes knocking. Rudy invades Felix's loft in search of original genetic samples, bringing a rapidly deteriorating Seth with him. The confrontation ends not in battle, but in tragedy.
All fools are rich. So take. They come.
Seth collapses, his mind fragmented by the disease. Before Sarah and Kira, Rudy makes a decision of brutal mercy. He executes his own brother to spare him the agony. It is not an act of hatred, but of distorted love, showing Sarah that the loyalty among the casters is as deep as that of the Leadus. Seth's death leaves a trail of fear and urgency. Realizing nowhere is safe, Sarah makes the hardest decision of all, sending Kira away with Cal. The farewell is quick and painful, a necessary sacrifice, so Sarah can fight unencumbered. Now, alone and hardened by loss, she focuses on her next target. The key to finding Helena and understanding the Castor disease lies with the clone embedded within the Prolithians. In a dark motel room, Mark burns the tattoo off his arm with a blowtorch, trying to erase his identity, but the mark of the Brotherhood is something fire cannot destroy. Death leaves behind more than just a body. It leaves a trail of complicity that stains everyone it touches. At Felix's loft, the reality is visceral and grotesque. Sarah and Felix face the task of disposing of Seth's remains, the Castor clone whose neurological failure destroyed him. Art, the detective who swore to protect and serve, crosses the final line. Instead of making an arrest, he helps cover it up. The guilt over Beth's suicide still weighs on him, and protecting Sarah becomes his penance. They are no longer just allies. They are accomplices in a game where morality is flexible. As the body is dissolved in acid in the bathtub, a scene blending science with horror, Cosima sees an opportunity. Seth's biology is the key to understanding the disease haunting her brothers. The brain is preserved, a bloody puzzle piece sent to Scott's makeshift lab. Far away, the illusion of normalcy tries to take root. Mark and Gracie, fugitives from the Prolithian cult, hide in a motel. Mark promises a new life, but military loyalty still runs through his veins. He isn't just fleeing, he is on a secret mission to recover genetic samples stolen by Henrik. His love for Gracie is real, but duty to his blood brothers is a chain he cannot break. In the suburbs, Allison decides that the best defense is a financial offense. Under the facade of a respectable campaign for school trustee, she and Donnie expand their drug empire, now camouflaged in boxes of artisanal soaps.
Bath beads, body lotions, anything you need to relax.
Marcy Coates, her political rival, tries to intimidate them, but Allison finds power in illegality. The danger makes her feel alive. Sarah's search leads her to Mark's trail. In a tense confrontation at a diner, she uses the truth as a weapon. By showing Gracie the photo of the Castor clones, reality collapses. Mark isn't just a deserter. He is a copy, a piece of a larger experiment. The revelation shatters Gracie's trust, but tragedy is lurking. Mark, desperate for answers, tortures Willard Finch, a former associate of Henrik's, but the brutality spirals out of control, and the old man dies before he can speak. Chaos ensues. Meanwhile, in the lab, Cosima makes a discovery that shifts the entire paradigm of the Clone War. Seth's DNA and the Leda DNA are not just similar, they are complementary. The Castor clones are biological brothers to Sarah and her sisters. They are family. Destiny's irony is cruel. As Sarah tries to process this connection, Bonnie, the fanatical matriarch, hunts down the fugitives. In a dark cornfield, the sound of a gunshot tears through the silence. Mark falls, wounded by the woman who should have been his mother-in-law, leaving Sarah alone in the darkness, surrounded by enemies who share her own blood. Night in the cornfield is disorienting and lethal. Sarah, driven by an instinct that blends survival with a strange family loyalty, helps Mark escape Bonnie's fury. They are natural enemies, but circumstances create strange bedfellows. In an abandoned house, Sarah removes the bullet from Mark's leg. It is a moment of forced intimacy, where secrets are traded for bandages. Mark reveals he never found the samples the military so desperately craves. Henrik's search was, apparently, in vain. Far from there, Gracie's fate is sealed with blood and tears. The stress and the flight take their toll, and she suffers a miscarriage. To her mother, Bonnie, Gracie has lost her only value, that of being a sacred vessel. Without the miracle baby, she is banished, cast out from the only family she has ever known. The conditional love of the fundamentalists reveals itself in its coldest form.
You will not be welcome back here again.
At the military base, Helena proves she is no ordinary prisoner. Feigning docility, she manipulates the guards and explores the bowels of the complex. What she finds is a nightmare. Parsons, another Castor clone, kept alive with his skull cut open, his brain exposed for agonizing experiments. He begs for death. Helena, who knows the pain of being treated as a scientific object, makes a choice. With a scalpel in hand and tears in her eyes, she delivers the mercy their creators deny. She sets him free from the pain, silencing his tortured mind forever. In the suburbs, Allison's business attracts the attention of bigger players. Ramon's supplier comes to collect his debts, introducing Allison to Jason Kellerman, a high school ex-boyfriend turned charismatic criminal. The spark of the past and the promise of profits seduce Allison. She convinces Jason she can double his returns, consolidating her position as a suburban kingpin. Back on the hunt, Sarah and Mark follow Henrik's final lead to a small cemetery. Cosima's theory is confirmed. Henrik didn't store samples in vials. He created a son. They unearth an infant's coffin, finding the remains of a deceased Castor clone, the pure genetic source everyone is looking for. But victory is short-lived. The roar of a motorcycle announces Rudy's arrival. The Castor Alpha Predator isn't there to negotiate.
Sarah, you really shouldn't have done that. Would have made it quick and
Before Sarah, the fragile alliance shatters. Rudy welcomes Mark back into the Brotherhood, and together, they take the coffin, the key to either a cure or destruction. Sarah is left behind, watching the brothers depart, realizing that the blood ties between the Castors are stronger than any temporary truce. They leave no loose ends, and the war has just become personal. The sound of chains echoes in the cold cell, but for Helena, the true torture isn't the metal on her wrists. It's Sarah's presence in the cell next door. The sisters' physical proximity only highlights the emotional abyss that now separates them. Sarah, waking up in the middle of this military nightmare, desperately tries to explain that she wasn't the one who sold her out, that the betrayal came from Mistress S. But trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, especially for someone like Helena, who has spent her life being used. To her, Sarah is just another disappointment. While Sarah is dragged away to have her blood drained by Dr. Cody, who seeks stem cells in the Leda genetic code to cure the Castors, life outside the base continues at an unsettling pace. Gracie, rejected by her own family and banished by the Prolithians, finds unlikely unlikely refuge with Art and, eventually, in the arms of Sarah's dysfunctional family. Mistress S and Felix take her in, not out of obligation, but because they understand what it means to have nowhere to go. Paul visits Sarah, trying to justify his actions with cold military logic, claiming it's for a greater good. Sarah, however, sees only hypocrisy. The noble Castor boys are nothing more than creeps collecting samples from innocent women. This accusation plants a seed of doubt in Paul's mind. He begins investigating Parsons' records and discovers a disturbing pattern of intimate collections and catalogs of women, realizing the mission may be much darker than he was told. At the loft, Gracie experiences freedom for the first time, drinking and dancing with Felix, trying to shed the weight of her fundamentalist upbringing. But the joy is brutally interrupted when she collapses in sharp pain. The emergency reveals a terrifying symptom. Her eyes are blood red. The disease consuming the Castor clones is sexually transmitted, and Gracie is living proof that the infection is out in the wild. Back at the base, Sarah tries to coordinate an escape, but Helena has other plans. Using brute force fueled by rage and improvised tools, Helena breaks her restraints and eliminates a guard with lethal precision. When the moment comes to free Sarah, Helena hesitates. Resentment speaks louder. She chooses the solitude of the desert, leaving Sarah behind, trapped and screaming for help. Blood ties sometimes aren't enough to hold someone who has already suffered too much. Fever consumes Sarah, turning her cell into a theater of memories and hallucinations. Rudy's blood, injected into her veins by Dr. Cody as a perverse experiment, sends her into a delirium. Between wakefulness and dreams, Sarah encounters ghosts from the past. She sees Beth Childs, the sister whose suicide started it all. In a painful, subconscious dialogue, Sarah confronts her guilt, questioning if she stole Beth's life or simply took on a burden the cop could no longer carry. Beth, cold and tragic, reminds Sarah that we do terrible things for the people we love. While Sarah fights her internal demons, Paul finally sees the truth. Confronting Cody and analyzing the data with Mark, he discovers that the doctor isn't just looking for a cure. She is creating a biological weapon to sterilize women using the Castor pathogen. Paul's duty as a soldier collides with his morality. He realizes he has been protecting a monster. Elsewhere, Allison and Donnie continue their climb in the suburbs, negotiating with Jason Kellerman to buy her mother's store, Bubbles, as a front for their drug trade. In contrast to the military chaos, their suburban ambition seems almost innocent, though the risks are real. Meanwhile, Cosima and Scott, pressured by Cosima's declining health and new discoveries about the disease, confront Rachel, demanding she decipher the codes in Duncan's book. The situation at the military base reaches a breaking point. Paul takes control, freeing Sarah, but the escape is not simple. Gravely wounded in a confrontation with the clone Miller, Paul knows he won't make it out. He leads Sarah to an escape tunnel and locks the gate, separating himself from her. Ignoring Sarah's desperate protests, Paul makes a final confession. It was never Beth he loved, it was Sarah.
It was never Beth I loved.
Paul stays behind to ensure Cody's research is destroyed. When Cody and her soldiers advance, expecting a surrender, Paul drops a grenade. The explosion consumes the data, the lab, and Paul himself, a final sacrifice to try and wipe away his mistakes. Sarah, devastated and alone in the tunnel, seems hopeless until a familiar figure returns. Helena, moved perhaps by guilt or the unbreakable love she feels for her sestras, returns to rescue her. Together, they walk away from the smoke, survivors of a war that just took one of their most complex protectors. The dust from the military compound has barely settled, but Sarah and Helena's escape brings no immediate peace. In a secluded bar, the tension between the sisters and Mistress S is palpable. Helena, still wounded by the betrayal that handed her over to the military, sees Siobhan not as a mother, but as a threat. The knife in Helena's hand trembles with the promise of violence, but Siobhan doesn't back down. She offers the naked truth. Sacrifices were made to save Kira, but when the physical fight gives way to exhaustion, Siobhan disarms the assassin with a hug. Helena, starved for connection, accepts the gesture.
Shit, I hit you. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I've got you.
Family for them is forged in forgiveness, not purity. Meanwhile, in the suburbs, Allison's ambition collides violently with her past. Buying the Bubbles store was supposed to be a triumph, a perfect front for the pill empire she is building with Donnie. However, her mother Connie uses the contract signing as an emotional weapon. Connie reveals a devastating secret. Allison wasn't just adopted or conceived by chance. She was an upgrade, a deliberate choice to ensure a better child than her biological father could offer. The rejection cuts deeper than any blade. Allison realizes she was always a product to her mother, never a daughter. Chaos spreads to the local school, where Allison's campaign for school trustee becomes a stage for imminent disaster. Jason, Kellerman, and Pouchy demand their money, and the swapped envelopes threaten to expose everything. The irony is cruel. Allison must project the image of the perfect family while negotiating with criminals in the parking lot. Cosima, trying to hide the severity of her own illness, is dragged into this charade. Dressed as Allison, she takes the stage, a dying scientist playing an ambitious housewife. Amidst the confusion of identities and improvised speeches about loyalty, Allison manages to regain control, but the victory is hollow. She confronts her mother and takes over the store, not for approval, but out of defiance. Cosima, for her part, returns to Shay's arms, but the secret of her illness cannot be contained forever. As she relaxes in the bathtub, the water slowly tints red. Cosima's body is failing, and in the solitude of her makeshift captivity, Rachel Duncan begins to decipher her father's book. She holds the key to the cure, and in her cold eyes there is the certainty that knowledge is the only currency that matters. The quest for a cure becomes a race against time, and morality is the first casualty. Sarah and Felix face an impossible choice. To save Cosima, they need Rachel's mind. But Rachel, calculating as ever, demands a high price, a new identity, and total freedom. The target is Crystal, a naive clone working as a manicurist, completely oblivious to the genetic conspiracy surrounding her. Crystal believes she was attacked by perverted twins, unaware she narrowly escaped abduction by Castor. Her ignorance is a fragile blessing, about to be shattered. Felix, using his charm as a weapon, infiltrates Crystal's life. He sees a light in her, an innocence his sisters lost long ago.
I was like so wrong.
As he steals her personal data, guilt weighs heavy on his shoulders. Crystal confesses her suspicions and fears, seeking validation, but Felix is forced to betray that trust to serve a greater good. It is identity theft in the most literal and cruel sense. They are sacrificing one sister to save another. In the lab, tension reaches its breaking point. Scott, coerced by Rudy's violence, loses the physical copy of Duncan's book. The war between Lida and Castor invades their sanctuary. Delphine, trying to protect Cosima in an aggressive manner, discovers Scott and Rachel's betrayal. The scientist takes drastic measures, firing Scott and isolating Cosima, but her actions are born of desperate love. The goodbye between Delphine and Cosima is painful, a kiss sealed with the bitter taste of secrets and the fear of imminent death. Rachel's escape plan is executed with surgical precision and betrayal. Dr. Nealon, revealing his hidden loyalty, orchestrates a macabre switch. Crystal is placed in an induced coma, becoming a prisoner in Rachel's place, while the former Dyad executive escapes to freedom, leaving behind only enigmatic clues deciphered from the book. The message points to London and an original number. Sarah, Siobhan, and Felix realize the game has changed. They have a direction, but the cost has been devastating. Crystal pays the price for a war she doesn't understand, and Rachel is loose, with a new eye and old ambitions. The cure for Cosima and the key to the survival of all clones now lie in the past, in London, where it all began. The search for the origin will require them to go back home, into the belly of the beast. The streets of London carry memories Siobhan would rather forget, but the need for survival brings her back to where it all started. Accompanied by Sarah and Felix, she revisits old allies in search of the Castor original. The clue lies in an old nursery rhyme and a prisoner number. Terry, a loyal old friend, promises to solve the mystery behind the digits, but in a world of corporate secrets, loyalty is often paid for in blood. While the search takes place across the ocean, domestic tension explodes at the Hendricks household. Donnie, his face marked by Jason's violence, makes the mistake of losing Helena's nitrogen tank to a local drug dealer named Pouchy. To Helena, that isn't scientific equipment. Those are her babies, her fertilized eggs. The maternal fury of a trained assassin knows no bounds. She marches into the criminal's den, not to negotiate, but to demand what is hers. When they threaten Donnie's children, Helena responds with surgical brutality, walking out covered in blood with her future children safe. Refund accepted, she decides.
I got refund.
Mistrust corrodes relationships in the lab. Cosima and Scott suspect Shay is the mole leaking information to Castor. The evidence seems damning, and coldness takes over their relationship. However, the betrayal comes from where it's least expected. Gracie, desperate to save Mark's life and ensure a short but happy future by his side, gives up the location of Duncan's book. Love, twisted by fear, makes her sell out her husband's sisters. Delphine discovers the truth in time to spare Shay, but the emotional damage is already done. In London, tragedy strikes. Ferdinand, the ruthless cleaner, gets to Terry before Siobhan. Sarah and her foster mother find their friend in his final breaths, but he dies whispering a name: Kendall Malone. Siobhan's pain is palpable, but mourning must wait. Sarah, quick and opportunistic, uses the dead man's phone to track the next piece of the puzzle. The trail leads to an apartment where the expectation of finding a dangerous man is subverted. Kendall Malone is an elderly, bitter woman, and, shockingly, Siobhan's biological mother. The revelation is a gut punch. Kendall murdered Siobhan's husband decades ago. The hatred between mother and daughter is instantaneous and poisonous. But science reveals something even more disturbing. Kendall is a human chimera. She absorbed a twin brother in the womb. She possesses two distinct cell lines. Shock silences the room as Sarah realizes the magnitude of the discovery. Kendall isn't just the Castor original. She is the Leda original too. The source of all clones, male and female, is the same person. Rachel wakes in a sophisticated room, far from Dyad's cold cell. The physical pain has diminished, replaced by an artificial clarity. Her lost eye has been replaced by a functional technological prosthesis. She is free, but the solitude of her surroundings suggests she is a piece in a much larger game than she imagines. In London, the discovery of Kendall Malone changes everything. Sarah and Siobhan try to extract the genetic material needed to cure Cosima, but living with the original matriarch is unbearable. Kendall is hostile, and Siobhan can barely contain her desire for revenge for her husband's murder. However, the blood that connects them all is their only hope for survival. Sarah must mediate generational hatred to save her sisters. Dr. Cody, relentless in her pursuit of the perfect biological weapon, sends Rudy to eliminate the threat. The target is Allison, but it's Helena waiting for him in the suburban garage. The confrontation is brutal. Rudy, weakened by the neurological flaws of his own creation, faces Helena's protective savagery. It isn't just a physical fight, it's a clash between two experiments, where Helena's will to live overcomes Rudy's military training. He dies, and with him, a part of the immediate threat dissipates. Behind the scenes at Dyad, reality begins to crumble for Delphine. She discovers that the woman in the coma isn't Rachel, but Crystal. Neo-Lucian's manipulation runs deeper than anyone suspected. Confronting Dr. Nealon, she learns that Dyad and Topside are merely fronts. The true agenda is directed evolution, monstrous and invasive. Nealon tries to attack her in a grotesque manner, expelling a biological parasite, forcing Delphine to kill him. Before he dies, he prophesies that she won't survive until dawn.
You won't live till morning.
Ferdinand, realizing he was played by Neo-Lucian and that Rachel is alive elsewhere, flips sides instantly. He kills his own henchman and allows Sarah and her family to escape with Kendall's genetic material. It's a rare victory, celebrated with a family dinner at Allison's house. The election was won, the enemies have retreated, and for a moment, there is laughter and toasts to the sisters who are no longer there. But Nealon's warning hangs like a shadow. In a dark parking lot, Delphine knows her time is up. She says her goodbyes not with fear, but with a question about the fate of Cosima and her sisters. A gunshot shatters the silence, leaving her fate uncertain on the cold asphalt. Far away, in an isolated room, Rachel meets her benefactor. It isn't a stranger, but her own mother, Susan Duncan, alive and watching everything. And in the frozen reaches of Iceland, Sarah finally reunites with Kira. The white snow covers the trail of blood left behind, offering a brief moment of peace before the next storm begins. The narrative rewinds, plunging into the chaotic final days of Beth Childs. Her world is a haze of crushed pills and mounting paranoia. At home, silence reigns. Her relationship with Paul has become a frozen theater. Ritualistic kisses hide secrets neither dares to voice. Beth knows he's monitoring her, but she has ghosts of her own. A new voice emerges from the digital darkness. MK, a clone sister hiding behind a sheep mask and layers of encryption, makes contact. Her warning is terrifying. Neo-Lucian has infiltrated everything, including Beth's own bed. Driven by mistrust and the chemistry coursing through her veins, Beth follows clues to a dark forest. What she and Art find there defies police logic. A mutilated body with surgical, grotesque body modifications. The pressure crushes Beth. At work, the looks are judgmental. At home, she installs cameras to watch Paul, seeking proof of betrayal to justify her fear. She seeks refuge in Art's arms, the only one who seems to see her as human, rather than an experiment or a problem to be solved. But the obsession for answers consumes her. She confronts Dr. Leakey publicly, a dangerous move that draws the attention of predators. The breadcrumb trail leads her to a dark alley and a clandestine surgical room. Hidden, Beth witnesses the unthinkable. Doctors extracting a living, worm-like creature from a man's cheek. The horror makes her flinch. The noise alerts the surgeons and a corrupt detective, Duco, who is overseeing the operation. In the desperate flight through the alley, Beth's anxiety pulls the trigger. The gunshot shatters the night, but the one who falls isn't an enemy. It's an unarmed civilian woman. Beth's world disintegrates. Art arrives in time to find his partner in shock, vomiting the guilt that will never leave her. Together, they stage a fake crime scene, planting a gun in the victim's hand. The moral line has been crossed, and there is no way back. Beth is now trapped in a web of lies, blackmail, and chemical trauma. In the present, the phone rings in Iceland, waking Sarah from an uneasy sleep. The voice on the other end carries the weight of the past. It's MK, emerging from the shadows once again. The warning that didn't save Beth now echoes for Sarah. They know where you are. Run! Iceland's white tranquility is consumed by fire. At MK's warning, Sarah doesn't hesitate. Safety is a fragile illusion for them. The safe house is left behind in flames as the family flees through the snow, carrying little more than their own survival. The destination is Toronto, but not the surface. The new sanctuary is underground, in the basement of a comic book shop, where the fantastic reality of the issues collides with the deadly science of their existence. Family dynamics, however, begin to crack. Felix, feeling marginalized amidst the clone crisis, isolates himself in his loft, seeking connections with his own biological family. His loneliness is palpable, a silent cry that Sarah, occupied with the war, can barely hear. Meanwhile, Allison deals with the shocking news that Helena is carrying twins, a chaotic blessing that promises to turn her suburban world upside down. Sarah and Art pick up the investigation where Beth left off. They break into the deceased cop's old apartment, a mausoleum of memories and secrets. Recovering the hidden camera footage Beth installed, Sarah finds herself watching her sister's mental collapse. It's like looking into a broken mirror. She sees the fear, the self-medication, and the devastating loneliness that led Beth to suicide. The images reveal Beth's obsession with Neo-Lucian and the mysterious body modifications. Determined to understand what killed her sister, Sarah follows the trail to a nightclub frequented by body mod enthusiasts. There, she is mistaken for MK and discovers the existence of horrific videos showing the extraction of biotechnological implants. The search leads her to a deserted laundromat, where tension reaches its peak. Two Neo-Lucian paramedics ambush her. Sarah fights, but she is overpowered. The terror is cold and clinical. They force her mouth open, inspecting the inside of her cheek with flashlights and instruments. Sarah expects death or abduction, but instead, she faces rejection. It's not her, they say, frustrated, before leaving her alone and confused on the cold floor. Back in the basement, the adrenaline gives way to a crawling horror. Sarah grabs a flashlight and, with Siobhan's help, examines her own mouth. It wasn't a mistake. Beneath the delicate skin of her cheek, something subtle moves. An invisible scar, a pulsating implant. The war isn't just out there, in the streets or corporate labs. The enemy has already invaded the final frontier. It is inside her. Rachel's isolation is a sterile, gilded cage. Still confined to a wheelchair, she struggles to regain movement under the watchful eye of Ira, a caster clone unlike any other, calm, gentle, and a physician. There, far from the world, Charlotte questions her own existence and the mythology of her creation, while Rachel realizes that her mother, Susan Duncan, is not only alive but orchestrating every step of her forced rehabilitation. The technology that restored Rachel's sight is a scientific miracle, but the price is a total lack of freedom. In Toronto, fear takes physical form and resides beneath Sarah's skin. The implant in her cheek pulses like a biological time bomb. In the hideout beneath the comic book shop, Cosima and Scott's analysis confirms the worst. The device is a complex mix of organic and inorganic material, and removing it by force could be fatal. The tension alienates Sarah from Kira, who retreats, feeling excluded amidst the chaos that always surrounds her mother. Seeking answers, Sarah looks for Felix but hits an unexpected wall. Her foster brother is drowning his sorrows with Adele, his newly discovered biological sister. The presence of the drunken lawyer is a painful reminder for Sarah. The blood ties Felix so desperately sought are now pulling him away from the clone sisterhood. Feeling alone, Sarah turns to Dizzy. The hacker confirms the implant is nightmare technology, known only through rumors and corpses, pointing to a name linked to the horrifying videos: Alonso Martinez.
Word going around. His name is Alonso Martinez.
In the suburbs, normalcy is but a thin veneer over rotten secrets. Allison and Donnie, desperate to help, realize the only source of comparison for Sarah's implant is buried in their garage. With sledgehammers and churning stomachs, the couple exhumes Dr. Leakey's body. The stench of decomposition fills the air as Allison, determined to save her sister, cuts into the putrid flesh of the man who ruined their lives. Amidst the decay, they find the macabre prize, an intact device in the corpse's cheek. Sarah's quest to extract the implant leads her to an underground dental clinic. Mistaken for Beth by a compliant nurse, Sarah submits to a risky procedure. The dentist's chair becomes an instrument of torture as the nurse pins her mouth open and exposes the device, but betrayal hangs in the air. Before the nurse can complete what appears to be a trap, the door swings open. Ferdinand emerges not as an executioner, but as an unlikely savior. With a swift, brutal move, he slits the nurse's throat, saving Sarah from a deadly toxin that would have been released if the implant were punctured incorrectly. The topside cleaner has his own motives for intervening. He brings a vital intercepted message from Rachel, a revelation that shifts the entire game board. Susan Duncan is alive, and Neolution's ultimate goal is to control human evolution itself. Revenge is a dish MK prepares with surgical precision and obsessive patience. In her isolated trailer, the sheep-masked hacker revisits ghosts from the past, linking Dyad to a tragedy in Helsinki that decimated her sisters and her only friend, Nikki. For her, the war is not just about survival, but retribution. Meanwhile, Siobhan and Sarah form an uneasy alliance with Ferdinand, joining forces to locate Rachel and understand the technology threatening Sarah's life. Beth Child's paranoia continues to echo in the present. Allison is approached by a woman named Trina, who mistakes her for the deceased cop and mentions Brightborn, a fertility clinic linked to Neolution. Seeing a new lead, Allison mobilizes Donnie and Felix. The investigation requires them to infiltrate the clinic, where the promise of perfect babies and risk-free pregnancies hides a disturbing eugenicist agenda. Felix and Donnie, posing as a couple, dive into the aseptic world of Brightborn, discovering that Neolution is commercializing the very biology that created the clones. In the Hendrix's backyard, a silent and devastating drama unfolds. Helena, sensing the discomfort and jealousy her pregnancy causes Allison, makes a solitary decision. She unearths the nitrogen tank where she kept her fertilized eggs, only to discover that negligence has destroyed the viability of the embryos. With a heavy heart, she buries the possibility of her old family along with the tank. Without formal goodbyes, Helena puts on her backpack and walks away, choosing isolation to protect those she loves from her own darkness. Sarah's hunt leads her to MK's digital trail, but the hacker has plans that don't include rescue. Using Sarah to lure Ferdinand to Beth's apartment, MK sets a deadly trap. When the topside assassin sits before the computer to access his accounts, a metallic click freezes his blood. He is sitting on a pressure bomb. MK removes her mask, revealing a face scarred by the pain of Helsinki.
Oh, yes, it is. Hello, Ferdinand.
She doesn't just want Ferdinand's money, she wants him to burn, just as her sisters burned. Sarah arrives in time to witness the confrontation, pleading for the life of a monster who is, momentarily, useful. While MK drains Ferdinand's bank accounts and pours gasoline on the floor, Siobhan uses her guerrilla expertise to disarm the explosive. MK flees, leaving behind a trail of destruction and a crucial lead. The mind behind Brightborn is Evie Cho, a woman who sees the clones not as people, but as obsolete technology to be discarded. The search for answers drags Cosima and Donnie into the Lion's Den. At Brightborn headquarters, disguised and tense, they attempt to uncover the secret behind the enhanced babies the company promises, but the place doesn't smell of miracles. It smells of sterilization and secrets. The charade is short-lived. Evie Cho, with her calculating gaze, instantly dismantles their cover. Only the cold, authoritative intervention of Susan Duncan prevents the situation from spiraling out of control, revealing that Neolution is a nest of vipers where alliances shift according to convenience. Cosima gains access to the clinic's inner sanctum, but what she finds is not science, it's horror. In the nursery, far from the public eye, the price of genetic perfection is revealed. Susan, recognizing Cosima's brilliant intellect, offers not threats, but an intellectual seduction. She proposes a partnership based on Kendall Malone's original genome. For a scientist dying of a respiratory illness, Susan's offer is a promise of life, but accepting it means betraying everything her sisters stand for. The line between survival and collaboration begins to blur. Meanwhile, Crystal continues her solitary and paranoid crusade. What seems delusional to the outside world leads her to real discoveries. While breaking into Brightborn, she crosses paths with Ira, a Castor clone who, unlike his violent brothers, displays a disturbing docility at Susan's side. Crystal proves that, despite being underestimated, her defensive instincts are sharp, turning a chance encounter with a disguised Donnie into a physical confrontation. Outside the labs, Sarah's paranoia begins to erode what remains of her family. Instead of enjoying a moment of peace with Kira, she presses her daughter for answers about her premonitory dreams, forcing the girl to shut down. Sarah's suspicion then turns to Adele, Felix's new biological sister. Convinced the lawyer is a Neolution mole, Sarah manipulates a dinner at Mistress S's house to forcibly obtain genetic samples. Felix watches, wounded, as his foster sister tries to dismantle his new family connection. When the DNA test results arrive, the truth is a bitter blow. Adele is legitimately Felix's sister. Sarah's intuition, usually her greatest weapon, has failed, revealing only her own fear and inability to trust. Felix's look of disappointment cuts deeper than any Neolutionist blade. Sarah realizes too late that, in trying to protect her family, she may have just broken it. Despair dictates the rules of the game.
Genetically tested.
I thought we already did that.
Yeah, you did.
Sarah and Cosima decide the only way out is a deal with the devil. Hand over the genetic material of Kendall Malone, the original, in exchange for the removal of the maggot bot in Sarah's cheek and the promise of a cure for all the Leda sisters. It is a high-stakes gamble that places the life of the genetic matriarch in Susan Duncan's hands. As they prepare for the extraction, Beth Child's past bleeds into the present, revealing she once stood in these same hallways with the same gun in her hand, confronting the same impossible choices. At the Brightborn clinic, the tension is palpable. Cosima and Scott race against time to copy Susan's research data before delivering the cure. Sarah undergoes surgery, vulnerable and anesthetized, as the deadly device is extracted from her face. For a brief moment, there is relief. The mechanical parasite is out, but victory is a cruel illusion. As Sarah wakes, the security of Felix's hideout is breached. Signs of a struggle and a dropped pack of cigarettes signal the worst-case scenario. Kendall has been kidnapped. Chaos ensues. Scott watches his computers get hijacked by a devastating virus that erases years of research in seconds. It was all a trap. Susan Duncan seems genuinely shocked, suggesting the coup came from within, perhaps from Ira, who is found overdosing, unable to cope with the betrayal of his own biology. But the truth is much more sinister and wears the face of Evie Cho. Final flashbacks of Beth reveal the missing piece of the puzzle. Evie manipulated Beth into trying to kill Susan years ago, a coup attempt to take over Neolution. Beth, realizing she was merely a pawn in a power war, spared Susan, but that mercy sealed her fate. Evie vowed to destroy everything Beth loved, pushing the officer toward the train tracks. In the present, Beth's nightmare comes to fruition. In an isolated field, the corrupt detective Duco drags Kendall out of a van. Evie Cho watches with disdain. To her, clones are obsolete technology, and the cure is irrelevant in the face of her enhanced implants. Before Cosima's horrified eyes, Duco executes Kendall and torches the body, reducing the only source of a cure for the Lidas sisters and Castor brothers to ashes. Evie releases Cosima, only to deliver one final devastating message: Delphine is dead. Alone in the darkness, watching the fire consume hope, Cosima feels the crushing weight of total defeat. Rachel's prison expands, revealing itself as a gilded cage. Upon climbing the stairs of her captivity, she finds not freedom, but Susan Duncan in a modernist house, surrounded by the relentless winter of an isolated island. Welcome to the island of Dr. Moreau.
Still is. Welcome to the island of Dr. Moreau.
There, Susan rewrites history. Neolution did not begin with modern science, but with the industrial ambition of a Victorian man who wished to create superior humans. Rachel, now guest and prisoner, realizes the rabbit hole goes much deeper than she imagined. On the mainland, grief acts as a slow-acting poison. Siobhan, devastated by her mother Kendall's execution, pins the blame directly on Sarah. Harsh words drive the prodigal daughter away, pushing Sarah back toward her old demons. The bar, the booze, the empty sex with strangers. Sarah seeks desperate oblivion, trying to outrun the pain. However, she finds only the reflection of Beth Childs in every mirror and crowd, a persistent ghost whispering about tragic endings and suicide.
Stop following me.
I'm not. You're in my place.
Meanwhile, the victorious Evie Cho consolidates her power. Although her own biology is failing due to a compromised immune system, her cruelty remains intact. In a video conference with the island, she declares the new order. Project Leda will be dismantled. To her, the clones are obsolete technology, assets to be quietly liquidated. There will be no other visible massacre like Helsinki, only a slow, deadly fading into oblivion. Rachel tries to negotiate but is rejected with contempt. In the lab, desperation dictates the rules. Without the research data, Cosima and Scott are in the dark. The scientist contemplates the unthinkable, implanting the maggot bot removed from Sarah into herself, hoping to generate a cure. It is a suicide mission, but fate intervenes through Felix and Crystal. The news hits like an electric shock. Delphine was seen alive, being taken away after the shooting. The certainty of death turns into a fragile hope, and Cosima steps back from the brink, deciding to fight another day. The night ends on a bridge over the train tracks, the same grim setting that swallowed Beth. Sarah stares into the void, drunk and haunted by hallucinations, ready to let the darkness win. But Felix arrives in time. With the help of Beth's presence, he anchors Sarah to reality. Together, they choose to face the dawn.
We need you.
Far away, on the island, Rachel's reality begins to glitch. Through her bionic eye, she sees a digital swan hovering in the air. A system failure or a hidden message.
Dear God.
The suburban security of the Hendricks family crumbles behind bars. Donnie tries to maintain his composure in prison, but the threat is real and has a name: Neolution. An inmate marks him, ensuring the fear is constant. On the outside, the noose tightens. Corrupt detective Duco uses Donnie's life as a bargaining chip, pressuring Allison to betray her own sister. He demands Sarah's location, or her husband will pay in blood. But the sisters are no longer running blind. MK resurfaces through Kira's computer screen, bringing vital intel on Evie Cho's extermination plans. Extreme necessity forces unlikely alliances. A tense video conference connects Cosima's makeshift lab to Susan Duncan's island. The mutual contempt is palpable, especially between Rachel and Sarah. Physical and emotional wounds are still open. However, science offers a narrow path, merging Leda eggs with Iris sperm to recreate Kendall's original genome. It is a desperate biological gamble. Siobhan, driven by a cold and calculating fury, begins hunting Duco. She knows deployment diplomacy is over. Meanwhile, tension peaks during the church play rehearsal. Allison, ironically cast as a traitor, appears to buckle under Duco's pressure to save Donnie. She gives up Sarah's location, but in a family forged in war, betrayal is just another layer of disguise. Duco takes the bait. At the comic book shop, he finds not a defenseless victim, but an ambush led by Art and Sarah. With the immediate threat to Donnie neutralized in prison, all that remains is the reckoning.
You a smart player?
It's over, Duco.
Siobhan takes charge. It isn't just justice, it's personal. Duco tries to negotiate, justifying his crimes as protecting his own family. But Siobhan doesn't see a man before her. She sees her mother's executioner. The shot is dry and final.
This is from my mom.
No.
The cycle of violence takes its toll but secures the group's momentary safety. With the blood cleaned and the path cleared, science moves forward. Cosima leaves by helicopter for the island, carrying the last hope for a cure. She goes straight into the lion's den, determined to work with Susan Duncan. On the island, Rachel's synthetic vision expands once more. The digital swan returns, now accompanied by the ghostly image of a bearded man. The boundaries between technology and reality are dissolving, suggesting there are eyes watching everything, invisible until now. Rachel's mind is a puzzle with pieces that don't fit. In Toronto, intrusive visions invade her digital reality. Swans, axes, and bearded men in a rustic camp. Meanwhile, far from the concrete jungle, Helena emerges in the snow. She is no longer a prisoner or a desperate fugitive. She is a hunter, carrying a slaughtered buck over her shoulders. She proves that the wild never left her. The war against Neolution shifts battlefields. With Brightborn poised to expand its genetic empire, Sarah, Felix, and Art race against time to find the mothers who escaped the clinic's horrors. The search reveals the enemy's brutality. One fugitive, Tabitha, is already dead, creating a grim outlook for the remaining survivor, Kendra. In an uneasy scientific alliance on the island, Cosima and Susan Duncan take a bold step. They fertilize an egg with Ira's genetic material, seeking the cure through the very biology that condemned them. Cosima reads the words of P.T. Westmoreland, the founder, with a mix of intellectual fascination and moral repugnance. Science advances, but the human cost remains an unknown. The pressure on the Hendricks family reaches its breaking point. Donnie is free on bail, but freedom is an illusion under the judgmental gaze of the community and police surveillance. Allison feels her faith crumbling. To her, God seems to have left the room. Tension explodes when Frank, a Neolution thug, breaks into the house. With Donnie tied up and threatened by a maggot bot, Allison's suburban life is about to end in tragedy. But salvation comes from the most unexpected place. Helena walks through the door not with words, but with a well-aimed arrow to the assailant's neck. Family is built on loyalty, and sometimes on necessary violence. Rachel, driven by cold ambition, plays her own game. She locates Kendra and uses the cruelest leverage possible, the safety of the woman's son. There is no empathy in her actions, only calculation. Possessing the evidence, Rachel seeks not justice, but power. She blackmails Evie Cho for a seat on the board. The final blow is public and devastating. During a press conference, reporters receive images of the Brightborn crime. Evie's benefactor facade crumbles in real time. While her rival's empire burns, Rachel realizes her visions are not technical glitches, but messages. Someone on the island is trying to communicate. In an isolated cabin, warmed by a fireplace, the truth is revealed. Delphine is alive. Crystal, the unlikely witness, saw what no one else did. The moment Van Leer intervened to save the wounded scientist, whisking her away. But in the present, Susan Duncan's island has become an uncommunicative fortress. A digital blackout falls over Cosima, isolating her just as the cure seems within reach. On the mainland, Evie Cho's fall is absolute. Attempting to justify her crimes to the Neolution board, she discovers too late that she has become obsolete. The technology she championed becomes her executioner, as Van Leer activates the device in her cheek. Evie dies a victim of her own natural selection, coldly discarded in favor of new leadership. The The power vacuum draws Rachel in. In a hotel room, she reaffirms her dominance over Ferdinand, mixing pleasure with political manipulation. But her ambition goes much further. She crashes the board meeting, not as a suppliant, but as the new architect of human cloning's future. To her, her sisters are not family. They are patented property. Betrayal on the island is inevitable. Susan Duncan, confronted by the boundless ambition of the daughter she created, tries to maintain control, locking Cosima in the lab, but Rachel arrives, bringing chaos. The family reunion is marked by blood when Rachel, rejected by her creator and determined to usurp the throne, stabs Susan. Sarah reaches the epicenter of the conflict but finds a nightmare scenario. Following the trail of blood to the basement, she faces an unhinged Rachel. The fight is brutal. Sarah, wounded in the leg and physically overpowered, is forced to flee into the frozen woods, leaving behind the chance to cure them all. Meanwhile, Cosima and Charlotte wander through the freezing darkness of the island, life slipping away in the cold. Hope appears in the form of a mysterious man who guides them to a secret refuge. There, in a heated cabin, the impossible happens. Cosima and Delphine are reunited. Love serves as the only safe harbor in a collapsing world. But Rachel's victory comes at a terrible price. On the other end of the phone line, Ferdinand's voice chills Sarah's blood. He is holding Siobhan and Kira at gunpoint. Checkmate. With the science secure and her enemies scattered or captured, Rachel prepares to meet the supreme authority behind it all. The door opens and she smiles at the man who is over a century old, P.T. Westmoreland. The end game has begun. The island night offers no respite, only shadows and hidden dangers. Sarah, exhausted and wounded, drags herself across the beach under the cloak of darkness. Her final attempt to contact the outside world is a desperate call to Felix, but technology fails her when she needs it most. Her battery dies, leaving her isolated in the silence of the ocean. Her solitude is briefly interrupted by a brutal attack from a feral man, a visceral fight for survival that forces her to flee into the dense forest. Meanwhile, Cosima wakes from her feverish delirium. She is not in a cell, but in a rustic cabin. A young woman named Mud introduces her to Revival, a self-sufficient village that looks like a utopian dream built at the end of the world. The settlement is the personal project of P.T. Westmoreland, a 170-year-old man obsessed with longevity. There, Cosima reunites with Charlotte, but discovers that the web of Susan Duncan and Rachel is more present than ever. On the mainland, the noose tightens. Felix and Art search through the wreckage of Siobhan's life, finding signs of a struggle indicating that Mistress S did not go down without a fight. Tension rises with the arrival of Maddie Anger, Art's new partner, whose loyalty to Neolution is as clear as her brutality. She makes it evident that the hunt for Helena is the absolute priority, using veiled threats against Art's family to ensure his cooperation. Allison and Donnie's flight into the woods ends in disaster. In a moment of panic and hesitation, Donnie watches helplessly as armed men capture his wife. Allison is taken away, and when Maddie confronts the group on the road, the suburban housewife attempts to protect Helena's location, lying at gunpoint. Back on the island, Delphine operates in the shadows of the Revival Clinic. She treats Aisha, a girl brought there with promises of a cure, and hides the precious Lidocure away from prying eyes before being whisked away by messengers. Cosima, curious and skeptical, begins to investigate the true nature of the place, where the science of longevity is treated with religious fervor. Sarah's situation becomes critical. Hunted by guards who discard strange evidence in the forest, she watches from the shadows a disturbing spectacle. Speakers play classical music, summoning the villagers to the foot of the big house. Rachel emerges, not as a prisoner, but as the bringer of light, promising access to the fountain of youth. The cold scientist has seized control of the myth. In the dead of night, Cosima breaks into the clinic and finds the cure hidden by Delphine, but she also finds Sarah. The reunion is tense. Cosima, seduced by the local science, decides to stay, insisting that Sarah must flee and take the cure with her, but the plan falls apart. Rachel intercepts the escape at the boathouse. There is no negotiation, only a tranquilizer dart that silences Sarah's resistance, plunging her back into darkness.
It's a new day, Sarah.
Sarah's awakening brings a cruel inversion of reality. She wakes from a dream where Kira's voice guides her, only to find herself trapped in a cell at Dyad. Her wounds have been treated, but freedom is a carefully constructed illusion. Ferdinand, with his habitual coldness, orchestrates a show of power disguised as benevolence. Through screens, Sarah sees her sisters and allies, Allison coerced at home, Cosima working on the island, and finally, Kira. The message is clear: the resistance is over. To ensure everyone's survival, Sarah is forced to accept a humiliating deal. She, Siobhan, and Kira can return home, but on the condition that the girl reports for regular testing at Dyad. It is a life under constant surveillance, where every move is monitored by guards stationed in the street. Siobhan's house ceases to be a sanctuary and becomes a velvet prison. Meanwhile, a medical miracle defies logic at the hospital where Helena and Donnie have taken refuge. The branch that pierced the pregnant Sestra's abdomen during a fight in the forest miraculously didn't harm the babies. The wound has vanished, leaving doctors stunned and sparking dangerous suspicions. Helena, ever instinctive, senses the medical staff's excessive interest and prepares her escape, neutralizing a doctor before fleeing with Donnie. The truce imposed by Rachel is unbearable for Sarah. Felix discovers that MK, the elusive hacker, is hiding in his loft, gravely ill and coughing up blood. MK brings grim news about the restart of human cloning, reigniting the flame of rebellion. Sarah decides she cannot hand over Kira. A risky plan is hatched to pull the girl out of school before Dyad gets their hands on her. On the island, Cosima comes face to face with the myth. P.T. Westmoreland receives her in his office filled with Victorian memorabilia, seducing her with the promise of science without ethical boundaries. He offers her the chance to continue curing her sisters, manipulating her desire to save lives to keep her under his thumb. The rescue plan in Toronto reaches its climax. Sarah disguises herself as Rachel to infiltrate the school, managing to retrieve Kira moments before the real Rachel arrives. But the escape requires a terrible sacrifice. Sarah leaves Kira with Felix and runs to get MK, but the hacker is too weak to run. Seeing Ferdinand invading the building, MK makes a final decision. She dons Sarah's clothes, offering herself as bait. Ferdinand's revenge is savage. Believing he is facing his nemesis, he attacks without mercy. When he realizes it is MK, his fury explodes, and he kills her coldly, ending the life of the Sestra, who bore the scars of Helsinki. At the lakeside meeting point, MK's sacrifice seems to have been in vain. Kira, demonstrating a supernatural intuition, senses the hacker sister's death at that exact moment. For the first time, the girl refuses her mother's protection. She wants answers about her own nature, answers that only Rachel and Dyad promised to give. Kira voluntarily surrenders to Rachel, leaving Sarah devastated and powerless. The night ends with new alliances forged in the shadows. Rachel discards Ferdinand, whose brutality has become a liability, and takes Kira with her. In the silent, guarded house, Siobhan opens the door to an unexpected visitor, Delphine. Away from Sarah's eyes, the two women know that the true war will require secrets that even their families cannot know. Memories of simpler times haunt Allison's thoughts. She remembers a dinner with Donnie and their friends, Ainsley and Chad, a night fueled by magic mushrooms and genuine laughter. It was a time when the greatest danger was a passing hallucination, not the imminent death of her sisters. But current reality is relentless. While Sarah fights for survival and Cosima seeks the cure, Allison feels the crushing weight of her own irrelevance. To Nia Lucian, she has no scientific value. To her family, she feels like a liability. The pressure mounts when Detective Art and the brutal Maddie Enger arrive at the Hendricks door with a search warrant. They are looking for connections to dead drug dealers, but the true danger lies buried under the concrete of the garage, Dr. Leakey's body. Allison's suburban sanctuary is about to crumble. Feeling cornered and useless, she succumbs to old demons. A bottle of pills, hidden long ago, finds its way into a bottle of iced tea. It is a silent cry for help, or perhaps just an attempt to numb the fear. At the church fair, the facade of perfection begins to crack. Donnie, trying to keep up appearances, accidentally drinks Allison's spiked tea. What was supposed to be a dance performance becomes a grotesque spectacle of physical and moral collapse in front of the whole neighborhood. When Allison takes the stage to defend her husband, her pain boils over. She exposes her addictions and the community's hypocrisy in a bitter, devastating speech. The curtain closes, but the true horror is at home. The police have begun breaking the garage floor. Donnie, still dazed, calls Sarah in a panic. They are about to be discovered, but at rock bottom, Allison finds a strange clarity. If she cannot be the scientist or the warrior, she will be the cleaner. While Art desperately tries to buy time, Allison takes drastic action. She digs up Leaky's decomposed corpse and takes it directly into the lion's den, Rachel's office at Dyad. Allison places the putrid head on Rachel's pristine desk. It is both a peace offering and an assertion of power. She admits the accident and transfers the problem to Rachel, knowing that Neolution would rather clean up the mess than deal with a police scandal. Rachel, pragmatic and cold, accepts the deal. The police back off. The secret remains buried. At home, silence returns. But something has fundamentally changed. Allison saved her family, but lost herself in the process. She says goodbye to Donnie, needing to walk away to rediscover who Allison Hendricks is beyond the pills, the guns, and the lies. On the island, death is not the end, only another experiment. Susan Duncan wakes up, brought back to life by P.T. Westmoreland's science. The centenarian founder needs her, and as a sign of good faith, reveals that Ira is also alive. But Westmoreland's vision demands absolute obedience. Meanwhile, in the village of Revival, Cosima and little Charlotte find a human tooth in the forest. The villagers whisper about a bear, but distant roars and the terror in Mud's eyes suggest something far more sinister. The island hides monsters, and not all of them wear lab coats. On the mainland, Sarah's nightmare takes a domestic and terrifying form. The panic that Rachel is torturing her daughter gives way to a more disturbing truth. Kira is testing her own rapid healing ability. The girl is not a passive victim. She is fascinated by her own biology, distancing herself from her mother's fear and drawing closer to Dyad's cold curiosity. For Sarah, seeing her daughter embrace this magical nature is more painful than any physical wound. Siobhan knows that to win this war, one must strike at the roots. She and Sarah execute a bold plan, stealing a psychologist's identity to infiltrate a high-security psychiatric clinic. The target is Virginia Cody, the mother of the Castor clones, kept drugged and forgotten. Upon waking the dangerous woman, they discover that Westmoreland and Susan's past is stained by grotesque errors. Before the perfection of Leda and Castor, there was a failed experiment, a monster created by tumors and unbridled ambition, locked away and hidden from the world. Simultaneously, on the island, Cosima's curiosity leads her to the basement of the manor house. She finds cells, blood, and shackles.
Needless to say, we didn't always get it right. But too many mistakes were made.
Following Mud into the forest, Cosima catches a glimpse of the deformed creature Westmoreland's science produced. It is living proof that the quest for longevity has no ethical limits. With the new information, the circle of trust must expand and fragment. Siobhan makes a difficult decision to protect her own. She sends Felix and Adele to Switzerland, away from the front lines but armed with the vital mission of following Neolution's money. The family separates to survive. As Felix departs, Sarah seeks refuge in an isolated convent, where she finds Helena writing her memoirs. The pregnant assassin offers simple wisdom regarding Kira. The girl feels everything the sisters feel. Trying to protect her from the truth is useless when the connection is in the blood. Fear hangs over the island forest, thick as fog. Armed guards comb the woods for a bear, but the residents of Revival know the story doesn't hold up. The terror in Mud's eyes confirms the danger is far more human and tragic than a wild animal. As the village locks down, Cosima dives into the science to uncover the truth. The tooth found in the forest reveals a staggering biological secret, the Lin28A gene. It's not just a DNA sequence. It is the fountain of youth P.T. Westmoreland has chased for decades, and crucially, it is the same genetic anomaly that grants Kira her accelerated healing. Science, once again, links the survival of the clones to the fate of Sarah's daughter. Far away, Sarah and Kira share a moment of profound, almost telepathic connection. They can feel each other's presence, a bond that transcends common biology. Kira, now aware of the danger surrounding her family, is no longer a child protected by ignorance. She is an active ally. In the island mansion, Westmoreland's mask of benevolence begins to slip. He reveals to his VIP guests that the monster in the woods has a name, Giannis. He was the first test subject for the Lin-28A gene, a failed attempt at immortality orchestrated by Susan Duncan. The plan is now clear and terrifying. Use Kira to harvest eggs and create a new generation of subjects across more than 1,000 surrogates. Human life is reduced to mere industrial material. Giannis, the tormented creature, invades the big house, returning to the place where his humanity was stolen. The reunion between creator and creature holds no compassion. P.T. Westmoreland, in an act of calculated cruelty, offers a gun to Cosima, ordering her to execute the monster to end his suffering. Cosima refuses to be an accomplice to murder. Seeing her hesitation, the centenarian pulls the trigger without trembling. Giannis dies, not as an experiment, but as a final victim of a man's vanity. Cosima is dragged to a cage, a prisoner not just of bars, but of the certainty that for Westmoreland, compassion is merely a weakness to be eliminated. The world of corporate conspiracies collides with shallow vanity when Crystal resurfaces. This time, the enemy doesn't use guns, but poisoned cosmetics. An online video shows the horror of a young woman losing her hair in clumps, and Crystal, with her sharp intuition hidden under layers of naivety, knows this is Neolution's work. Felix and Adele, tracking the money trail in Switzerland, confirm that the organization's tentacles touch major beauty companies. At home, protecting Kira requires cunning. The girl fakes a violent illness to avoid being taken to Dyad, buying precious time. Sarah and Siobhan know the sudden interest in Kira is linked to the discovery of the youth gene. Meanwhile, Crystal decides to act on her own. She ignores Sarah's plans and sets out to confront Leonard Sipp, an executive linked to Dyad. What looks like a clumsy seduction reveals a terrifying truth. Facial creams are being tested as delivery systems for experimental drugs. Unsuspecting human guinea pigs are being poisoned in the name of progress. On the island, tension reaches a breaking point. The death of little Aisha without the promised cure ignites the villagers' distrust. Behind the scenes, the relics of the past collapse. Susan Duncan, tired of Westmoreland's tyranny, plots a silent assassination with the help of Mud and Ira. The plan is to inject morphine into the old founder's dialysis system. Ira, struggling with his own neurological glitches, frees Cosima and hands over the most powerful weapon of all, the truth. An old photograph proves that P.T. Westmoreland is a fraud. He is not 170 years old. He is just a mortal man using science to sustain a messianic lie. Cosima confronts the village with this revelation. The followers' hope turns into incendiary rage. Fire begins to consume revival, burning the lies along with the buildings. In the chaos of the fire, final betrayals are consummated. Virginia Cody intervenes to save the founder's life and in a brutal act, kills Susan Duncan. The creator of Project Leda dies at the hands of her rival. As Cosima and Charlotte flee on a boat, leaving hell behind, P.T. Westmoreland remains standing, watching his empire of lies burn. Power is a fragile illusion, especially for one created in a lab. Rachel Duncan believes she is at the top of the Neo-Lucian hierarchy, but the shadows of the past never vanish. In her memories, she returns to her childhood, an 8-year-old girl reciting identification numbers of other clones to Dr. Leakey, aware that she herself is a piece on this board. In the present, this cruel dynamic repeats. Rachel introduces the new chief scientist, Virginia Cody, and announces the next terrifying step: the biological exploitation of little Kira. The child, frightened and subjected to needles for sleep studies, now faces the horror of having her eggs harvested. To Dyad, she is not a girl, she is a resource to be mined. Meanwhile, in the hideout beneath the comic book store, the Resistance discovers a chink in the enemy's armor. Cosima and Scott unearth the truth about the mythical P.T. Westmoreland. He is not a Victorian immortal. He is John Patrick, born in Texas in 1939. The great patriarch is nothing but a megalomaniacal fraud. Rachel's illusion of control shatters when she visits the island. What was supposed to be a summit meeting becomes a medical humiliation. Cody demands a biopsy from Rachel herself to test the cure. Seeing her serial number still active on the monitors, the reality hits her like a physical blow. She never stopped being property. Back at the office, alcohol becomes her only refuge against the omnipresent gaze of the camera in her artificial eye. But despair can be a powerful fuel. Rachel watches Kira drawing and realizes the cycle of abuse is about to restart. Westmoreland and Cody plan to discard the child's humanity in the name of science. Rachel begins drinking heavily, staging a breakdown for her observer, while her sharp mind locks onto a silent plan. She mixes sedatives into a juice box and forces Kira to drink, a grotesque scene that hides a secret mercy. Under the surveillance of the bionic eye, Rachel sends a text message out of the field of vision. "I assure you this is no joke." The final betrayal is executed with surgical precision. Rachel feigns obedience until the last second, delivering an unconscious Kira not to the operating room, but to the arms of Sarah and Siobhan inside an elevator. It is an act of rebellion, not affection. Alone in her office, Rachel sends the proof of Westmoreland's fraud to the Neolution board. The phone rings incessantly. Westmoreland tries to hack her vision, bombarding her with confusing images. But Rachel is done being watched. In an act of liberating brutality, she smashes a glass, takes a shard, and drives it into her own eye socket. The blood flows, the pain is blinding, but for the first time in her life, no one is watching. Freedom comes at a cost, and blood continues to be the currency. After self-mutilating to sever the connection with Neolution, Rachel wakes up in a hotel room with her empty sockets sutured and Ferdinand by her side. The physical pain is supplanted by a strange calm. The Neolution board has received the evidence of Westmoreland's fraud, and the silence of the enemies hangs over the city. For the sisters and their allies, it feels like a moment of respite. Sarah and Siobhan monitor the situation, surprised by the withdrawal of surveillance. Allison returns from her journey of self-discovery with purple hair and a new philosophy of life, seeking identity beyond her role as a suburban wife. Felix, taking advantage of the lull, opens an art exhibition celebrating the many faces of his sisters, using the clones as living models in a bold performance. But peace is just a facade painted over danger. At the convent, Helena believes she is safe, unaware that betrayal is at the door. Young Gracie, coerced by Mark and Cody, locates the pregnant clone. Though she tries to back out at the last moment to save Helena, it is too late. Armed Neolutionists storm the sanctuary. Gracie pays for her mistake with her life, and Helena is dragged away, a prisoner once more. Behind the scenes of the art gallery, a deadly game unfolds. Siobhan and Delphine aren't celebrating, they are conspiring. They have discovered that Neolution plans to collect DNA globally under the guise of health screenings, using the data to create selective biological weapons. They need Rachel to deliver the final blow. Rachel hands Ferdinand a thumb drive with incriminating evidence, instructing him to negotiate with the board. The board meeting becomes a massacre when the bluff is revealed and gunfire erupts. Ferdinand, feeling used and betrayed by Rachel, who sought to dismantle the corporation rather than profit from it, escapes the ambush with a thirst for vengeance. Fate converges at Siobhan's house, while Cosima and Delphine leak Neolution's rot to the world press, exploding the conspiracy publicly. Ferdinand invades Mistress S's residence. The confrontation is intimate and visceral. They trade words sharp as knives. Ferdinand demands the original files, but Siobhan smiles. The secret is out. The world already knows. The sound of the shot is dry and final.
That's just a little twist.
Ferdinand shoots Siobhan in the heart. Mortally wounded, she refuses to go down without a fight. With life fading, she asks for one last look at the photo of her children, Felix and Sarah. It is a distraction. She draws a hidden gun and shoots her assassin in the throat. As Ferdinand chokes on his own blood, Siobhan looks at the photo of her family one last time. She whispers, "Chickens," her term of endearment for those she protected with unwavering ferocity, and closes her eyes forever. The matriarch is gone, but her brood survives. Grief hangs heavy over the family, a fog that even the funeral rain cannot wash away. Siobhan is gone, and the void she leaves is immense, filled only by the mourning silence of her chickens. But there is no time for tears. Sister Irina's arrival brings a new terror. Helena's journal. Touching the scribbled pages, Sarah realizes the Pharaoh sister isn't hidden, but captured. The war is not yet over. In a sterile hotel room, Rachel is confronted by Art and Felix. She denies involvement in the kidnapping, but her information confirms the worst. The island has fallen, and Dyad is the only refuge left for the monsters who created them. In Dyad's concrete basement, the reality is brutal. P.T. Westmoreland has stripped away his grandeur. Without the wig, he is just John, a dying, addicted old man desperate for the stem cells from Helena's babies. Cruelty is his only remaining tool. He orders the death of Mark, the last Castor clone, discarded like trash as soon as he is no longer useful. Evolution has no loyalty.
And you?
I thought about being being a teacher. Good night, Mom.
Helena, bound and sedated, hears the threats of induced labor. Virginia Cody prepares the needles, cold and clinical, but the Ukrainian wolf still has teeth. Seizing an opening, Helena grabs a pair of scissors. She doesn't try to attack her captors. She attacks herself and chooses to bleed to death rather than allow her children to become lab rats. It is a supreme and terrible act of love. "You won't be an experiment," she whispers. Outside, the rescue plan is insane, born of desperation. Sarah dons Rachel's armor, the hair, the clothes, the icy posture. She surrenders herself to infiltrate the fortress. While Scott and Hell Wizard hack the security systems, Sarah stands face to face with the creator. The charade doesn't last long. When the mask falls, violence explodes. John discovers the imposter, but Cody interrupts the execution. Helena is dying and needs blood, compatible blood. Sarah is dragged to the delivery room, not as a prisoner, but as a donor. The blood of one flows into the other, life being pumped through plastic tubes while chaos reigns in the corridors. Art breaches the perimeter, creating the necessary distraction. The moment Cody tries to give water to a seemingly weak Helena, the response is brutal. Helena smashes her torturer's head against the table and cuts her restraints. She is free, but the body has its own clock. Her water breaks, blood flows, sirens wail, and in the middle of hell, life insists on arriving. "The baby is coming," Helena declares, and there is no turning back.
Oh, baby's coming.
Past and present collide in the subterranean halls of Dyad. As Sarah drags Helena through the concrete labyrinth, memories of Siobhan echo, old conversations outside a clinic, debating the choice to have or not have a child. The matriarch may be dead, but her voice guides Sarah every step of the way, teaching her to be strong when the world falls apart. The escape is blocked. Helena can no longer walk. They take refuge in a dirty equipment room, transforming it into a makeshift maternity ward. Art, loyal to the end, manages to disarm Maddie anger, but the circle is closing. Meanwhile, John succumbs to his own biological failure, delirious and injecting stimulants, a pathetic parody of the man who wanted to live forever. Virginia Cody, resilient as a cockroach, finds the hideout. She holds Art at gunpoint but underestimates the ferocity of a cornered mother. When Art creates an opening, Helena strikes. With a screwdriver and the brute force of instinct, she pierces Cody's throat. The woman who perverted science dies choking on her own blood at the feet of those she tried to control. Shortly after, it is John's turn. He finds Sarah, and the final confrontation is between the creator and the creature. There is no grand speech, only the brutality of survival. Sarah deals the final blow, ending a century of manipulation. The old man dies alone and forgotten, while in the next room, two boys enter the world, orange and purple, born in blood and battle. Time skips forward, but the scars remain. The Hendricks garage is now home to Helena and her twins. Life tries to find a normal rhythm, but Sarah feels adrift. She studies for her GED, trying to follow Siobhan's advice, but the empty house is a constant reminder of her loss. She thinks of running, selling everything and fleeing as she always has. The orphan instinct is hard to kill. However, healing comes in unexpected forms. Felix delivers the key to the future, a complete list of all the Leda clones, a gift of redemption from Rachel. They can save the others. In the backyard, under the stars, the sisters gather. There is no triumphant celebration, just raw honesty. Sarah confesses her fears of being a bad mother. Allison and Helena admit their own flaws. They realize they don't have to be perfect, just present. Helena finally names her sons, Arthur and Donnie, titles of honor for the men who helped them, not for the ones who created them. Helena opens her journal and reads the title of her story, Orphan Black. It is the record of their lives, their pain, and their bond. The final scene is not one of escape, but of permanence. Siobhan's house will not be sold. Full of clutter, art, and children, it remains alive. Sarah is the last to walk out the door, but this time, she isn't running. She closes the door to her home, ready for a day at the lake with her family. The orphan has finally stopped running.